Chapter 710. While Ouyang Shuo was having a heart-to-heart talk with the siege lion, Zheng He walked in. "My lord, lord of the siege lion." Zheng He bowed to Ouyang Shuo and said in a low voice, "My lord, I just got the information from the prisoners of war. Huangai's army should have arrived at the Red Cliff 3 days ago. It was the lord of the siege lion's suggestion to join up with Liu Bei's army. That is why we were delayed for a few days." Zheng He didn't finish his sentence. Clearly, the delay made by the siege lion for a few days was crucial to the war. Ouyang Shuo looked at the siege lion in front of him and nodded. Zheng He tactfully retreated. The siege lion might have realized that what he had done had already been discovered. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, "Let's not talk too much. You have done me a big favor, and I will give you something in return. I will let you take the captured Huangai's army and Guan Yu's army back. You can take them back to the Dongting Lake and continue to take the Wuling County." "Ah, thank you." The siege lion was excited. On the map, lords could capture native soldiers of the opposing side. However, it was difficult to control them. After all, time was limited and people's hearts were hard to make up. Even if the surrendered soldiers could go to the battlefield, Ouyang Shuo wouldn't dare to use them. If they suddenly turned against him on the battlefield, it would be a big joke. On the contrary, it would be much easier to control lords of the same side. Thus, handing the surrendered army to the siege lions was equivalent to handing them a ready-made, powerful army. Apart from that, there was another thing: side quests. On Sun Lu's side, Zhou Yu, Huangai, and Liu Bei's armies all had a big side quest. The side quest for Huangai's army was to take the Wuling County. Therefore, if the siege lion could complete Huangai's unfinished quest, not only could it gain a lot of contribution points in the process of taking the Wuling County, it could also get generous rewards. How could the siege lion not be excited? This war was a blessing in disguise for the siege lion. He was very glad that he had made the right choice. Apart from the army, I will give you some of the battleships left by Xiongba and the Wolf of Warriors. You can also use the cannons on the battleships, Ouyang Shuo added with a smile. "Thank you, brother." The siege lion didn't know what to say. Ouyang Shuo smiled as he stood up and patted the siege lion's shoulder. "What are you thanking me for? We're allies." And the siege lion nodded its head vigorously, feeling a lot of emotions. "Go. Prepare to depart immediately. Remember, you must enter the Wuling County before Liu Bei's army passes by the Dongting Lake. Don't run into them on the way. That would be embarrassing," Ouyang Shuo warned. "Big brother, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." "That's good." Ouyang Shuo also believed that the siege lion would handle it well. Before the siege lion left, he wanted to say something but hesitated. When he reached the door, he couldn't help but turn his head and say, "Big brother." Xuanlong was just confused for a moment. He didn't have any other thoughts. Ouyang Shuo's eyes narrowed. It seemed like the friendship between the sieging lion and the seeking dragon acupoint wasn't shallow. "Don't worry, I will take care of it." Ouyang Shuo smiled. "All right." The siege lion's smile was a bit forced. He sighed inwardly and turned to leave. Looking at the back of the siege lion, Ouyang Shuo also sighed with a complicated gaze. Through some methods, Ouyang Shuo managed to temporarily appease the siege lion. "Seeking dragons? Don't disappoint me." Ouyang Shuo's eyes glowed. The spacious reception room was instantly filled with killing intent. That afternoon, the siege lion led his army and left. Along with the army was a Taowu warship with Guan Yu's head. Apart from the siege lion, the other 2 lord-level players in Huangai's camp had already been killed. They had completely withdrawn from this war. Therefore, no one knew about the details of the siege lion at the Red Cliffs. After sending off the siege lion, Ouyang Shuo once again summoned Zheng He and Jia Su to the war room for a meeting. After defeating Huangai's army, they had to think about how to deal with Liu Bei's army. Liu Bei's army had about 20,000 men. In addition to the 50,000 dissimulated army, the total number of soldiers was 70,000. Moreover, Zhuge Liang was in the army. Ouyang Shuo wouldn't underestimate the army. Apart from that, the strategic plan for occupying the Red Cliffs had to be laid out. In view of this, Zhao Sihu, the commander of the 1st Division of the City Guards, was allowed to participate in this meeting. In the war room, as usual, Zheng He was the first to report the military situation. My lord, I have already investigated. The main transfer station for the rations being sent to the Dreamy Cloud Lake is located in Wulin. It is currently under our control. Good. Ouyang Shuo was very satisfied with Zheng He's efficiency. We have seized a large amount of rations from the granary in Wulin. At the same time, according to the information obtained from interrogating the rations officer, a batch of rations was urgently sent to the Dreamy Cloud Lake 3 days ago. Zheng He continued, what is unusual is that they had already sent a batch of rations 5 days ago. According to normal arrangements, the rations should be sent once every 5 days. In other words, the latest batch of rations was urgently requested by the frontline army. Zheng He added, Mister, what do you think? Ouyang Shuo asked Jiasu. Jiasu clearly knew about this as well. He said, if I am not wrong, a war is about to break out in Jiangling. That is why the frontline army requested for rations to be sent urgently in case of emergency. Mister, do you think that Zhou can break into Jiangling City? Ouyang Shuo asked. It is hard to say. Jiasu frowned. As mentioned before, the mutant army was the main force in this war. Jiasu had no idea what Di Chun and the rest would do. After all, no matter how good a strategist was, it would be useless if he did not understand the enemy. However, judging from the current situation, Zhou Yu's army probably has some trump card. Otherwise, they would not have requested for an emergency rations and attacked Jiangling with confidence. Jiasu stated his judgment. The Zhou Yu that Jiasu knew was definitely not a reckless person. Sometimes a strategist's view of the big picture was very important. Jiasu was like this. From some clues, he could faintly feel that the war at Jiangling would cause some waves. In fact, Ouyang Shuo also felt a trace of unease. Through the clouds, Ouyang Shuo could faintly feel that a huge blood cloud was gathering in the sky above Jiangling City. Boundless murderous intent filled the air. This was definitely not a good sign. Jiangling City was probably going to be covered in white bones. The war at Jiangling is out of our reach. We can't deal with it for now. Ouyang Shuo collected his emotions and continued. What we can do is follow the plan and cut off Zhou Yu's army's rations. Don't worry, Lord. This general has already made the arrangements. Zheng He took over the conversation and said, I was just about to report to Jun Shang that the Navy that escaped from the Red Cliffs has already been killed by the Navy camp that was sent out. This general has already ordered the Navy camp to start patrolling the waters downstream of Red Cliff. They will destroy all the ships that are transporting rations and cut off the enemy's rations. Well done. Ouyang Shuo nodded. Zheng He was becoming more and more decisive. Ouyang Shuo no longer needed to worry about the ordinary military affairs. Zhao Sihu, Ouyang Shuo called out. This general is here. Zhao Sihu reflexively stood up and saluted, his expression excited. Along the way, the most sullen were the soldiers of the city guard army. Seeing their side win after win, as landlubbers, they could not do anything at all. How sullen! The soldiers were already clamoring to participate in the great battle. From the looks of it, the opportunity had finally come. Arrange for a cavalry brigade to set off immediately. Follow the enemy's rations transportation route from Dreamy Cloud Lake. You must intercept the previous batch of rations. The enemy's front line is short of rations. We will make sure that they do not receive a single grain. Ouyang Shuo ordered. Don't worry, Lord. I guarantee that I will complete the mission. Zhao Siyu patted his chest and promised. The current city guard army had long since been reborn. Their combat strength was extraordinary. Even their mounts were all Mongolian warhorses. It would be easy for them to catch up to this slow-moving rations transportation team. Ouyang Shuo nodded, showing his trust in the city guard army's strength. Currently, this was all he could do for the Jiangling battlefield. Does Mr. have a good plan to deal with Liu Bei's army? After dealing with the rations, Ouyang Shuo finally focused the military discussion on the upcoming war. Among everyone present, Jiasu was the one who understood Liu Bei's organization the most. Jiasu did not decline modestly. He nodded and said, Liu Bei's army is more than 70,000. After occupying Changsha Prefecture, his military strength will probably increase again. If Liu Bei's army turns out in full force, it will definitely not be less than 80,000. After a pause, Jia Su continued, "Based on my understanding of Liu Bei, after seeing Guan Yu's head, I can almost conclude that Liu Bei will fight with all his strength to avenge Guan Yu." Thinking of the fact that the expeditionary army of Shanghai City this time was only 40,000, which was only half of the enemy's, the expressions of the generals present were no longer relaxed. Instead, they became solemn. Liu Bei's army has both land and water. Moreover, it is mainly land. His army has top-notch generals and top-notch strategists. Therefore, they will not act impulsively. We can conclude that they will not rashly enter the Red Cliffs and fall into our ambush. Jia Su continued his analysis. The biggest possibility is that they will advance by land and water. Their main force will launch a fierce attack from the land. You mean they will attack the Red Cliffs? Zheng He asked. The Red Cliffs and the Wulin are both possible. When Zhuge Liang used troops, he liked to use stratagems. The only thing that can be concluded is that before they reach the Red Cliffs, they will probably transport the army and supplies by warship. Then, they will land at a suitable location. After that, they will launch a long-distance attack and directly attack the vital points of our army. Jia Su had a clear view of the situation. This war could actually be seen as a confrontation between Jia Su and Zhuge Liang, these two top-notch strategists. Whoever was more calculative would be able to seize the initiative. It was no wonder that Jia Su showed a hint of excitement. Chapter 711. Sir, you mean to say that it is best to strike before the enemy disembarks? Ouyang Shua hesitated. That is what I mean. Jia Su nodded. However, there are countless landing points along the Yangtze River. It will be extremely difficult to accurately grasp the landing point of Liu Bei's army. Then what do you think? Ouyang Shua asked. Jia Su smiled confidently and finally revealed his plan. Ouyang Shua and the others' eyes lit up, and they praised some of the details. It had to be said that Jia Su was a genius. He had only been in the fleet for a short period of time, yet he was able to utilize the fleet's advantages to the extreme. The military meeting came to an end in the evening. Go and prepare. Everything will proceed according to plan. Ouyang Shua said. Yes. Zheng He and the others took their leave. The fleet, which had just rested for a day, once again entered a state of war. That night, the 2nd Battalion of the fleet left the Red Cliffs and disappeared into the night. Even Ouyang Shua himself disappeared from the Red Cliffs. In the following week, the army was preparing for the upcoming war. Linxiang City, Castellan Mansion. After occupying Changsha Commandery, Liu Bei made Linxiang his stronghold. Liu Bei, who had been a vagabond for most of his life, could not hide the excitement in his heart after finally conquering a territory that belonged to him. Unfortunately, the beautiful days did not last for more than a week before Liu Bei faced his darkest day. On this day, his second brother, Guan Yu, went to the Red Cliffs and brought back a bloody head. I will not let you go. Liu Bei's eyes were bloodshot and murderous. Liu Bei's hysterical roar shook the entire Castellan Mansion. In less than an hour, Guan Yu's death shocked the entire Linxiang City. Everyone was excited. Liu Bei immediately summoned Zhuge Liang and the others to discuss the expedition to the Red Cliffs. In the main hall of the Castellan Mansion, Zhuge Liang, Zhang Fei, Zhao Yun, and the mutants' representative, Lord Chun-Shin, were all present. Zhuge Liang frowned from the moment he entered. Seeing the murderous intent of his lord, who was sitting at the head of the table, Zhuge Liang forcefully swallowed his suggestion to not send troops. Before Huang Gai's army set off, Zhuge Liang suggested to immediately send troops, but was rejected by Liu Bei. Now that the Red Cliffs had fallen, Zhuge Liang was more inclined to not send troops. Firstly, Changsha County had just been occupied, and the people were not calm. Secondly, the Red Cliffs had already become a whirlpool of war. The most rational thing to do was to bide their time. Zhuge Liang speculated that the enemy guarding the Red Cliffs must have seen through this as well. That was why they wanted to offer Guan Yu's head with both hands to provoke Liu Bei into attacking. Just based on this point, Zhuge Liang had no choice but to be cautious. Seeing the expression on his lord's face, Zhuge Liang knew that he would never be able to stop his lord from sending troops. As a strategist and military advisor, Zhuge Liang needed to consider how to win this war. Otherwise, if they were to lose this battle, it would be wishful thinking for Liu Bei's clique to compete for the world. Zhang Fei's expression was almost the same as Liu Bei's. There was nothing much to say. General Zhao Yun was also indignant, but his emotions were not as intense as Zhang Fei's. Lord Chunxin also had a strange expression on his face. Guan Yu was killed, and the Red Cliffs had fallen. It was obvious what would happen to Xiong Ba and Zhang Lang. Lord Chunxin's current mood was undoubtedly complicated. On one hand, he was secretly gloating over Xiong Ba and Zhang Lang's early elimination. On the other hand, he was worried about the overall plan of the Yanhuang alliance, especially when Lord Chunxin had just made some progress in subduing Zhao Yun when such a thing happened. What the F***CK? Lord Chunxin gnashed his teeth. At this moment, Liu Bei spoke. How can a strange man say that he has no clothes? He is extremely savage and inhumane. He brutally killed our generals and is guilty of 1,000 crimes. I want to mobilize 80,000 generals to attack him. Military advisor, tell me your plan. At the beginning, Liu Bei named Zhuge Liang. Hearing this, Zhuge Liang frowned and tactfully said, My lord, Changsha County has just been pacified and the people's hearts are not stable. Would it be more appropriate to consider leaving 20,000 soldiers to hold the fort? No. Liu Bei decisively shook his head. If we can take Changsha County once, we can take it a second time. Right now, exterminating the Red Cliffs bandits is the right thing to do. We cannot divide our forces. Liu Bei was not stupid. He did not think that the enemy who had eliminated Lu Su's army, Huang Gai's army, and Guan Yu's army would be a pushover. Therefore, since they were going to attack, they had to stake everything and leave no leeway. This expedition was firstly to avenge Guan Yu. Secondly, it also contained Liu Bei's ambition. In Liu Bei's view, Huang Gai's army had been annihilated and Wuling County was a piece of juicy meat in his hands. Once the Red Cliffs army was defeated, the entire Jingzhou would probably be in his pocket. Liu Bei's thoughts were not known to outsiders. Most ambitious and ruthless people were like this. Their thoughts were hard to fathom, and they were not very pure. Hearing this, Zhuge Liang sighed inwardly. Adjusting his train of thought, he continued, The enemy is powerful and has an absolute advantage on the water route. They also occupy a strategic location like the Red Cliffs. The only way is to attack by land. Military advisor is right. Lord Chunxin suddenly interrupted and sternly said, It is not that I want to boost other people's morale and diminish my own. In today's world, only the mutant army previously stationed at the Red Cliffs can confront the enemy fleet head-on. Unfortunately, this fleet has already been destroyed. Therefore, we cannot attack the Red Cliffs by water. Lord Chunxin hastily interrupted because he was worried that the red-eyed Liu Bei would drag the mutant army into a dead end. In that case, military advisor, do you have any specific plans? Liu Bei asked. Sometimes, one could not help but admire Liu Bei. Even under such extreme anger, he was still able to maintain his rationality. This kind of forbearance and self-discipline was very frightening. It was no wonder that Cao Cao, Liu Biao, Sun Quan, and the other big shots were so afraid of Liu Bei. My lord, please take a look. Zhuge Liang came before the map and pointed to a waterway about 100 li away from the Red Cliffs. He introduced, This place is called Scholar Creek Town. It is an excellent landing point. When the main army reaches this place, the Navy will continue to advance with great fanfare after disguising themselves. They will do their best to attract the enemy's attention. The real main force will take this opportunity to land. Then, they will march through the night and reach the Red Cliffs before the Navy reaches the Red Cliffs. This will catch the enemy unprepared. This way, the Red Cliffs can be broken in one battle. Military advisor is indeed formidable. Please give the order. Liu Bei smiled in satisfaction. Seeing Zhuge Liang being so cooperative, he felt reassured and delegated the authority to mobilize the army to Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang did not pass on this responsibility and immediately began to lay out the specific battle plan. The next day, Liu Bei's army set off from Linxiang and headed straight for the Red Cliffs. 2 days before Liu Bei's army set off, the army led by the siege lion once again arrived at Linyuan City. Thus, the second phase of the Battle of the Red Cliffs began. Chapter 712. The torrential waters of the Yangtze River flowed day and night. Liu Bei's army sailed down the river. When they passed by the mouth of the Han River, Zhuge Liang suggested arranging for scouting warships to scout upstream of the Han River to prevent the enemy from setting up an ambush there. Liu Bei nodded in agreement. However, the scouting warships were only given half a day's time. In the end, they found nothing. Thus, the army continued to sail down the river, preparing to dock at Scholar Creek Town. Just as Liu Bei's army passed by the mouth of the Yangtze River, a huge beast quietly poked its green head out from a hidden corner of the river. Then, with a roll, it disappeared into the river. The huge green beast swam against the flow of the Han River, moving as fast as the wind. After swimming for half a day, it arrived upstream of the Han River. On the surface of the river, the 2nd Naval Battalion of Shanghai City's fleet was secretly stationed there. Crash! The huge beast leaped out of the water and soared, landing steadily on the flagship. A young general was waiting on the deck. When he saw the huge beast, he smiled and stroked its head, asking, "Did they just pass?" The huge beast could actually understand human speech. It nodded. "Good. Go and play." The young man patted the huge beast's head again. Nian, the huge beast flopped and once again disappeared into the river. The young man retracted his gaze and turned to look at the commander of the naval battalion. "You heard everything. Don't worry, my lord. With our speed, if we set off now, we will definitely arrive at the ambush location within the specified time." The general's expression was solemn and somewhat excited. The young man nodded. "Then let's act according to the plan." "Yes, my lord." After giving his instructions, the young man moved to the side of the deck where an aircraft was docked. Naturally, the young man was Ouyang Shua. With Little Qing keeping watch day and night, Liu Bei's navy was completely under Shanghai City's control. Jiasu's entire ambush plan required him to calculate the exact time. Firstly, he needed to know the exact time when Liu Bei's army would pass through the mouth of the Yangtze River. Secondly, he needed to inform the Red Cliff Navy in time. Only then could he coordinate everything. If he failed, all his previous efforts would go to waste. Jiasu's secret weapon was the pseudo-aircraft that was transported along with the fleet. Ouyang Shua inserted the purple magnetite stone hanging around his neck into the groove of the pseudo-aircraft. The mysterious patterns on the surface of the aircraft immediately shone with blue light, as if a huge beast had awakened. The aircraft rose into the air and disappeared into the horizon. Ouyang Shua piloted the mimicry flying device all the way down the Han River, past the mouth of the Yangtze River, and turned south, heading towards the Red Cliff. After flying for less than an hour, they saw Liu Bei's army sailing on the river. "Got you." Ouyang Shua smiled faintly as he steered the flying device away from the Yangtze River and entered the Cloud Dream Pool on the west side. He deliberately made a semicircle around the Red Cliff. 2 hours later, the aircraft slowly landed on the Chibi Dragon Prime. "My lord." Upon receiving the news, Zheng, he came out to welcome him. "The target has appeared. Let's set off." Ouyang Shua didn't beat around the bush. "Understood." Zheng He's spirit was lifted. He immediately commanded the army to leave the Red Cliff. Just like that, Shanghai City's fleet, one at the front and one at the back, firmly locked Liu Bei's army on the Yangtze River. On the morning of the 19th day of the campaign, on the deck of Liu Bei's flagship, Zhuge Liang stood in the wind. Pointing at the river ahead, he said with a smile, "My lord, Scholar Creek Town is not far ahead." "Good." Liu Bei was in a good mood, as they did not encounter any mishaps along the way. As long as the army successfully disembarked and quietly disappeared from the surface of the river, they would have half succeeded. At that moment, the alarm sounded. Hearing this, Liu Bei's heart trembled. What happened? My lord, enemy warships are catching up. The personal guard's voice trembled slightly. What? When Liu Bei heard this, he turned his head and saw a huge fleet of ships sailing towards them. The golden dragon flag hung on the fleet was dazzling. It's Shanghai City's fleet, Lord Chunshin said with a grave expression. How could this be? Liu Bei's face turned pale. He regretted listening to his military advisor and investigating more carefully. Military advisor, what should we do now? Liu Bei asked Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang was calm. My lord, don't be impatient. Looking at the fleet ahead, there aren't many of them. They must be a division of the enemy. Right now, the best thing to do is to arrange for the Navy to hold back the enemy while increasing our speed to reach Scholar Creek Town as soon as possible and find an opportunity to disembark. We have no chance of winning if we fight on the river. Military advisor is right. Liu Bei calmed down slightly. Liu Bei did not have much hope for the Navy. Hearing Zhuge Liang's words, he immediately ordered the Navy to separate from the main force and be in charge of sniping the enemy. The main force was to rush to Scholar Creek Town at full speed. Once they reached Scholar Creek Town, they would be invincible with their army. Just you wait. Liu Bei's hatred did not diminish. At the juncture of life and death, Liu Bei's army sped up like an arrow. At the same time, the Navy separated from the main force and prepared to intercept the Shanghai City fleet on the river. Fire! The Shanghai City fleet did not hesitate and immediately fired their ultimate move. Boom! 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 Cannons roared on the river again. The Navy left behind by Liu Bei was basically a suicide squad, or rather cannon fodder. In front of the powerful Shanghai City Navy, they were powerless to retaliate. In less than half an hour, the suicide squad was completely wiped out. Unfortunately, a large number of warship wreckage blocked the Yangtze River. As such, the Shanghai City fleet had no choice but to stop and clean up. Damn it! The commander of the Navy had an ugly expression on his face. If his lord's plan was delayed because of this, he would not be able to keep his head. Quick, clear a path. However, the warship wreckage was extremely large. It was not that easy to clear it. The anxious Ingzheng could only helplessly watch the enemy slowly disappear from his sight. On the flagship of Liu Bei's army, hearing the sounds of cannons behind them, Liu Bei and Zhuge Liang had grim expressions. Seeing how the Navy could not even withstand a single blow from the enemy, their hearts were pounding. Now that they thought about it, Lord Chunshin's words were not exaggerated at all. For a moment, Liu Bei felt regret. He regretted being so impulsive and mobilizing his army. Fortunately, we managed to escape this disaster. Not far ahead, Scholar Creek Town was already in sight. Just as Liu Bei thought that he had escaped for the time being, an army slowly sailed over from the water ahead. The golden dragon flag hanging on the warship was especially eye-catching. Damn it, how did this happen? A hint of despair flashed in Liu Bei's eyes. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand how he had fallen into the enemy's trap. Scholar Creek Town, which was less than a kilometer away, suddenly seemed out of reach. My lord, the only thing we can do now is to fight to the death, Zhuge Liang said slowly. Forcefully landing at this time was tantamount to mass suicide. They had no chance against the enemy's cannons. Zhuge Liang could not understand how the enemy had grasped their whereabouts and how the fleets in front and behind had coordinated so seamlessly. Of course, no matter how powerful Zhuge Liang was, he could not predict the existence of the mimic aircraft and Little Qing. As the saying went, one wrong step led to many wrong steps. The existence of high-tech bugs was something that Zhuge Liang could not control. Let's fight. Liu Bei's eyes narrowed, his voice somewhat hoarse. They had no way out on the river. Liu Bei's eyes were cold as he said in a cold voice, I want them to know what kind of destructive power a group of people in despair can unleash. The order to fight to the death quickly spread throughout the army. Kill! 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 For a moment, the sounds of killing shook the heavens and resounded through the clouds. At this moment, the Shanghai City fleet finally caught up. The two fleets surrounded Liu Bei's army, making it impossible for them to move. The first to attack was Liu Bei's army. Zhuge Liang knew that the enemy had cannons and that they had no chance of winning in a long-range battle. The only way was to disregard the sacrifices and charge forward to engage in close combat. Only then could they fight for a chance of survival and break out of the encirclement. Kill. Countless warships flew toward the Shanghai city fleet. On Dragon Head, Ouyang Shuo saw the enemy's actions and smiled without saying a word. Jiasu was also full of confidence. As a top-notch tactician, how could Jiasu not predict the enemy's desperate attack? Over 200 Scarlet Horse boats suddenly rushed out from the rear. There were only a few soldiers on the Scarlet Horse boats. Upon closer inspection, they were all prisoners of war. In order to prevent these prisoners of war from speaking, their tongues had all been cut off. Naturally, this was done by Jiasu. Strangely, the Scarlet Horse boats did not have anyone steering them, but they charged toward Liu Bei's navy like arrows. The secret was in the Frogman team hiding in the water. This time, the amazing Frogman team acted as trackers underwater. The densely packed Scarlet Horse boats pounced from the front and the back. The entire surface of the river was filled to the brim, leaving not a single gap. What are those things? Are they crazy? They're using these boats as vanguards. Kill them. Don't let them block the way. Liu Bei's army was in chaos. Countless arrows shot toward the Scarlet Horse boats. The prisoners of war tied up on the boats were killed by the arrows. Ha! They can't even withstand a single blow. Aren't they courting death? The victory in the first battle had effectively boosted the morale of the soldiers. Only Zhuge Liang had a solemn expression. He did not believe that the enemy would use such a childish tactic when they had cannons. The only explanation was that the boats were tricking him. Use the catapults to sink the boats. Don't let them get close. Zhuge Liang ordered. Liu Bei was stunned and asked, why? Do you think that the boats are tricking you? I can't say for sure. Zhuge Liang could not be sure. Upon closer inspection, the boats were empty. It did not seem like they were using fire to attack. While Zhuge Liang was puzzled, one after another fire arrows were launched from the fleet of Shanghai City, accurately hitting the Scarlet Horse boats that were still moving forward at high speed. Whoosh! In an instant, over 100 Scarlet Horse boats were set ablaze. Chapter 7:13. More than 100 Scarlet Horse boats, doused with fierce flaming oil, were connected to each other on the surface of the river, forming two flaming dragons. They flew across the vast surface of the river towards Liu Bei's army with an unstoppable force. Liu Bei and the others were sweating profusely. Everyone on the boats has clearly been shot to death. How can they continue to advance? Zhuge Liang was puzzled. There was no strong wind blowing on the surface of the river. The enemy's unfathomable methods left even Zhuge Liang, who prided himself on his intelligence, helpless. He could only watch as the flaming boats rapidly approached and crashed into their warships. As the warships collided, the flames spread for several li. Like a massive flaming dragon, the Scarlet Horse boats coiled up and devoured Liu Bei's army. The surface of the river instantly turned into a massive pot of oil. Liu Bei's army of tens of thousands were like vegetables in the pot. The situation had reached a critical point. We cannot hesitate anymore. Zhuge Liang clenched his teeth. Zilong, arrange for the boats to escort our lord ashore. Understood. The white-robed, silver-armored Zhao Zilong was courageous. Charging into the sea of flames was not an issue for him. Advisor, let's go together. Liu Bei did not want to leave Zhuge Liang behind. With Zhuge Liang around, Liu Bei still had a chance to rise again. Without Zhuge Liang, everything would be over. That's right, advisor. Let's go together. Among the generals in Liu Bei's faction, Zhao Yun admired Zhuge Liang the most. Sigh. Zhuge Liang sighed and nodded bitterly. Zhuge Liang was not someone who feared death. However, he did not want to die in such a cowardly manner on the Yangtze River. Zhang Fei volunteered to stay behind to cover Liu Bei and the others' retreat. Third brother. Liu Bei's eyes glistened with tears. Take care. Big brother, you go first. I'll catch up soon. Zhang Fei grinned with a cheerful expression. Before the flames reached the main army, the flagship released countless boats and brought Liu Bei and the others to the west bank of the Yangtze River. In just a short while, the flames grew stronger. Tens of thousands of soldiers were buried in the sea of flames, screaming miserably. Hearing that, Liu Bei burst into tears. I am useless," Liu Bei cried bitterly. On Dragon Head, Jiasu looked at the raging flames on the surface of the river with a complicated expression. 1 month ago, the fire that the allied armies of Sun Wukong and Liu Bei inflicted upon Cao Cao's army at the Red Cliffs was finally inflicted upon Liu Bei's army. An eye for an eye. If the Lord knew about this, he would probably laugh out loud, Jiasu thought. Jiasu pointed to the middle of the enemy army and said, "Marshal Governor, Liu Bei is about to escape. Don't worry, mister." Zheng He smiled and waved the flag. At the same time, dozens of Taowu battleships anchored to the shore. Hundreds of specially made, long planks were lowered and successfully reached the other side of the shore. Under the leadership of Zhao Sihu, the 1st Division of the City Guard Army, who had long been ready, stepped on the treads and quickly landed, ready to chase after the enemy. At the same time, the cannons of the battleships on both sides rang out, dealing more damage to the enemy. From the looks of it, Zheng He was going to kill them all without leaving them any leeway. Before the start of the battle, Jun Shang had already said that in this battle, the treacherous enemy was the top priority. If he could capture the enemy's generals, he would do his best to capture them. If he couldn't capture them, he would kill them. He would never let the tiger return to the mountains. Zheng He's actions were to carry out the emperor's orders. In Liu Bei's army, seeing that the enemy was about to intercept and kill their lord on the shore, Zhang Fei and the other generals, who were in charge of protecting Liu Bei, grew anxious. "Charge!" Zhang Fei shouted at the top of his lungs, ordering the burning battleships to charge forward. "Even if I die, I have to drag someone down with me." Zhang Fei was filled with killing intent. More importantly, he wanted to foil the enemy's landing plan and cover his elder brother's retreat. Dozens of burning battleships launched a counterattack against Shanghai City's fleet. However, their battleships were already on fire. None of their sails could be used, and they were burned full of holes. The only thing that could be used was the oars, which were also heavily damaged by the cannons. Less than 30% of the usable oars remained. The sailors in charge of rowing the oars also suffered heavy losses. Therefore, Zhang Fei could do nothing but worry, but the battleships advanced at a snail's pace. Some of the battleships were even unable to move. They paused pitifully on the surface of the river, waiting for their fate of destruction. Seeing that the enemy was risking their lives to fight, Zheng He naturally wouldn't remain indifferent. The battleships at the forefront became the main target of Shanghai City's fleet. Hundreds and thousands of cannons were fired at them. Coupled with waves of arrows, the leading battleship was stranded before it could even reach the center of the waterway, unable to move. The battleships that followed behind faced the same fate. Even if 1 or 2 battleships occasionally rushed to the front of Shanghai City's fleet, they were unable to advance even half a step. The frogmen who were lurking in the water were not to be trifled with. The battleships were already damaged to begin with, so they continued to fire at them. Inevitably, some frogmen were accidentally injured by the cannons and lost their lives at the bottom of the river. This was how cruel war was. Even if Shanghai City had the upper hand and held the initiative in the war, they had no choice but to make sacrifices in order to maximize their victory. There were very few flaming ships that could truly cause an impact on Shanghai City's fleet. At this moment, a missile accurately hit Zhang Fei's flagship. Looking at its trajectory, it was actually aimed at the area where Zhang Fei was. "General!" The soldiers cried out in alarm. Hearing the cry, Zhang Fei instinctively looked up at the sky, only to see a black cannonball flying toward him. He wanted to dodge, but it was already too late. With a boom, the missile hit Zhang Fei, who was standing on the deck and commanding at the speed of lightning. In an instant, blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Just like that, Zhang Ida, a fierce general of the 3 kingdoms, was blasted into pieces. General, when the surrounding soldiers saw this, their faces turned deathly pale. This was especially so for Zhang Fei's guards. According to the rules of the army, if the general died, the guards would be buried with him, regardless of whether they survived the battle or not. Hearing the cry of alarm behind him, Liu Bei, who had already boarded the small boat, turned around. He happened to see the scene of Zhang Fei being blasted away, and his eyes instantly turned bloodshot. Third brother. His voice was so shrill that it caused the expressions of those who heard it to change. Liu Bei's hatred for Shanghai City had already accumulated to its peak. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a blood feud. The two great forces had already reached a point where they would not rest until one party was dead. Precisely because of this, Ouyang Shuo had to kill them all. Master, let's go. Zhao Yun's eyes were also bloodshot, but he was still responsible for covering Liu Bei's escape. From the looks of it, there was still a bitter battle waiting for them on the shore. Third brother. Liu Bei wept bitterly, his voice choked with sobs. When the surrounding soldiers saw this, they were all moved. On the dragon head, Ouyang Shuo had also seen the scene just now. With regard to Zhang Fei's death, Ouyang Shuo could only sigh. For a fierce general like Zhang Fei, just like Guan Yu, even if he was captured, he would never pledge loyalty to Shanghai City. In terms of capturing the hearts of the people, Liu Bei was truly a top talent. Putting aside Guan Yu and Zhang Fei, who were existences that could not be subdued, even Zhuge Liang, Zhao Yun, and the others were loyal to Liu Bei. Ouyang Shuo could not help but admire Liu Bei's methods. Rather than being beheaded, Zhang Fei's current way of dying was more heroic. In the Battle of Red Cliffs, Ouyang Shuo's hands were stained with blood, and he became the nemesis of all historical generals. With Zhang Fei's death, the battle on the river gradually lost its suspense. The focus of the battle shifted from the water to the land. From the time they received the order to the time they all went ashore, it took Zhao Sihu and the city guards 40 minutes. After all, the shore was not a port, and it was very inconvenient for large warships to land. Just 10 minutes ago, Zhao Yun led over 3,000 soldiers to escort Liu Bei ashore, and they were retreating into the wilderness. Chase! Zhao Sihu revealed a ferocious smile and led his troops in pursuit. As they had all retreated from the ships at the last moment, neither Liu Bei's army nor the city guards had war horses. They could only walk. Now it was time to see who could walk faster. Zhao Sihu was confident because he had a secret weapon bestowed upon him by his lordship. What about Liu Bei? He could not be underestimated. The ones escorting Liu Bei's retreat were the most elite troops under Liu Bei's command. They were also Liu Bei's imperial guards, known as the White Nightmare Soldiers. Even in history, the White Nightmare Soldiers had always been an outstanding elite troop. In the history of the Three Kingdoms, the White Nightmare Soldiers were even more famous, and they were on par with Cao Cao's Tiger Leopard Cavalry. The commander of the White Nightmare Soldiers was not Zhao Yun, but the unknown Chun Ji. Chun Ji was from Runan, and he became Liu Bei's subordinate when he was in Yuzhou. He could be considered a veteran general. He had followed Liu Bei throughout his life, and his reputation was second only to Zhao Yun. The two generals were known for their loyalty and bravery. The records of the Three Kingdoms stated, conquering the South, conquering the West, controlling the times, fierce generals. The phrase controlling the times, fierce generals referred to the selection of the White Nightmare Soldiers. Each and every one of them was a fierce general. The conquering the South referred to the conquering the South general, Zhao Yun, while the conquering the West referred to the conquering the West general, Chun Ji. The two generals could be said to be equally matched. In history, during the Battle of Yiling, the Shu army retreated in defeat. Chun Ji and Fu Tong were responsible for bringing up the rear. Fu Tong died in battle, and Chun Ji vowed to avenge his comrades. He led 700 White Nightmare Soldiers to a place called Ape's Armhorn, 100 li away from White Emperor City. Each soldier was equipped with a spear and a padao. At that time, Zhu Ji's eldest son, Zhu Kai, was the vanguard of the Wu army. The Central Army, Quan Zong, Li Yi, Zhu Heng, Zhu ran and the others were at the rear, leading 10,000 Wu soldiers. The vanguard and the central army were all cavalry, and they vowed to capture Liu Bei alive. With just these 700 white nightmare soldiers and 700 spears, Chun Ji was able to block the attack of nearly 10,000 Wu soldiers. The might of the white nightmare soldiers and Chun Ji's valiance could be seen. The strange thing was that this fierce general of Shu did not even have a name in the romance of the Three Kingdoms. Chun Ji was a fierce general under Liu Bei's banner, second only to Zhao Yun. Luo Guanzhong respected Liu and demoted Chao, and wrote many fierce generals for the kingdom of Shu. The strength of these fierce generals had greatly surpassed the historical facts, so he could only be wronged by Chun Ji. Having Zhao Yun was enough a model. When Luo Guanzhong was planning, he might have combined the two of them. Thus, the might of Chun Ji in the romance of the Three Kingdoms could only be seen in Zhao Yun's shadow. A general was thus submerged in the romance of the Three Kingdoms. Thus, in this battle, even if Zhao Sihu had the advantage in numbers, it would not be easy. Chapter 714. In Liu Bei's army, the most tormented were Lord Chun Xin and the other mutant lords. Zhao Yun and Qin Ji were protecting Liu Bei and Zhuge Liang as they retreated. They could not be bothered to care about the mutants. In addition, the mutant army was a huge target. It was impossible to retreat smoothly. On the battle map, to Lord Chun Xin and the other lords, the army was everything. There was no point in abandoning their army and escaping alone. Even if they could gain some benefits from Liu Bei, it would not be enough to make up for the loss of their army. Rather than that, it was better to cut their losses. Lord Chun Xin gritted his teeth as the fire grew fiercer. In the end, he could only reluctantly cut his own throat and leave the map. If this dragged on, Lord Chun Xin's army would suffer heavy losses. Lord Chun Xin's efforts in the Battle of Red Cliffs had been in vain. The contribution points gained by the Rising Sun City Army in Changsha County were not even enough to revive the fallen soldiers. If I had known, I would not have come out to join in the fun. Lord Chun Xin sighed. He could only blame Zhuge Liang and Zhao Yun for being too tempting. Fortunately, Lord Chun Xin was a super tycoon and had no shortage of substitute dolls. Otherwise, with so many rebirths, Lord Chun Xin's individual combat power would be too weak. As the lords of Liu Bei's camp committed suicide, the mutant army transformed into rays of white light and disappeared from the map. Liu Bei's army became empty, with less than 10,000 soldiers remaining. However, the fire did not abate. Warships sank to the bottom of the river amidst the flames. It was a wretched sight. It was only a matter of time before Liu Bei's army was completely annihilated. The focus of the battlefield had completely shifted to the pursuit on the shore. Regardless of the outcome of the pursuit, Liu Bei's army had lost the ability to contend against Shanghai City's fleet. The natural stronghold of the Yangtze River was now in the hands of Shanghai City's fleet. After a month, Cao Cao's camp had once again regained control of the river and could attack the hinterland of River East at any time. The strategic goal of the expedition of the ocean-going fleet had been achieved. The fleet's next move would depend on the outcome of the battle at River Tomb. If River Tomb won, the campaign would be over. If River Tomb lost, they would be entangled for a while longer. Ouyang Shua had already set his sights on River East Zhouyu. In this campaign, Ouyang Shua did not come for contribution points, but to subdue Jiasu and Zhouyu. After this period of hard work, Jiasu no longer had any problems. Zhouyu, whom Ouyang Shua cared about the most, had yet to even see his face. Apart from his own abilities, Zhouyu was also the key to Ouyang Shua's success in subduing Lu Meng, Gan Ning, and the other naval generals. In this way, how could Ouyang Shua not be concerned about the situation in Jiangling? Before leaving River Tomb, Ouyang Shua had left a Taowu battleship parked on the river outside River Tomb City. His goal was to send the report of the battle to Ouyang Shua at the first possible moment. Calculating the time, the Battle of Jiangling should have come to an end. However, Ouyang Shua had yet to see that Taurus warship. On the contribution ranking, Di Chun, Bai Hua, and the others' contribution points had all changed. It was obvious that the battle in Jiangling was very intense. It was impossible for Ouyang Shuo to predict the outcome of the battle in River Tomb just based on the changes in the rankings. It just so happened that the military contribution leaderboard had been quiet for the past 2 days. Obviously, the Battle of Jiangling had either entered a stalemate or there was a result. I hope nothing bad will happen. Ouyang Shuo looked in the direction of Jiangling and felt a little uneasy in his heart. His line of sight shifted to the wilderness on the west bank of the Yangtze River. After the troops had gathered, Zhao Sihu took out a talisman and grinned. Military talisman. After use, the troop speed will be increased by 50% for 2 hours. With the talisman bestowed by the Lord, Zhao Sihu had the confidence to catch up to the enemy. Zhao Sihu did not hesitate and immediately tore the talisman apart. It turned into a white light that enveloped every soldier of the City Guard Division. Immediately, the soldiers sped up as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Even so, it was not easy to catch up to the Taowu elite troops. Firstly, the basic speed of the Taowu elite troops was faster than the City Guard Division. Secondly, the army had the support of Zhao Yun, Chen Di, and Zhuge Liang. In contrast, Zhao Sihu's general's blessing was somewhat lacking. Therefore, even with the support of the military talisman, the City Guard Division chased for a full hour before they could vaguely see Liu Bei's army in front of them. Chen Di and Zhao Yun, the two valiant generals, were very experienced. They constantly changed their direction as they retreated. Along the way, they even deliberately left behind misleading information, causing Zhao Sihu to suffer. Fortunately, they finally caught up to them. Zhao Sihu looked at the enemy in front of him and bared his teeth. Let's see where you can run to. On the other side, Chun Di and the others also realized that they had been caught up. My lord, leave first. I will deal with them. At the crucial moment, Chun Di stepped forward and requested to bring up the rear. Be careful. At this time, Liu Bei had already calmed down and immediately allocated 1,000 Taowu elite troops to Chen Di. Among the heroes of chaotic times, not a single one of them was a wishy-washy person at the crucial moment. In history, Chen Di led 700 Taowu elite troops and stopped the 10,000-strong army of Dong Yuwu. Liu Bei just did not know if this 1,000 elite troops could stop the 10,000 City Guard Division. After a while, the City Guard Division caught up. When Zhao Sihu saw that the enemy only left 1,000 to bring up the rear, he looked displeased. How arrogant! Immediately, Zhao Sihu wanted to split his troops to chase after Liu Bei's army. Zhao Sihu was very clear that Liu Bei and the others in front were the real big fish. This time, Zhao Sihu was holding back a wave of energy. He wanted to make a great contribution to the Lord. Want to leave? Get through me first. Chen Di pointed the end of his spear at Zhao Sihu. Kill! 1,000 Taowu elite troops immediately formed a formation and blocked the path of the City Guard Division. If you want to die, I will grant your wish. When Zhao Sihu saw this, he glared at them. Kill them and end the battle quickly. Kill! Under Zhao Sihu's command, the City Guard Division was also a group of fierce tigers. Zhao Sihu had always been a man of action. Without any nonsense, he raised his saber and attacked. The cultivation technique he practiced was the 5 tigers breaking the gate saber, which the Lord bestowed upon him when he exterminated the evil Lion Ridge bandits in his early years. After 2 years of cultivation, Zhao Sihu's 5 tigers breaking the gate saber had reached the realm of mastery. His battle prowess was only a few steps away from breaking through to the king level. What he lacked was an opportunity for enlightenment. The large saber Zhao Sihu used was a purple gold-grade weapon meticulously forged by Oyezi. It was incomparably sharp. Therefore, Zhao Sihu bit Chun Di as soon as the battle started. The two fierce generals fought together. They were evenly matched, and it was hard for them to separate. Sand and stones flew everywhere. Saber chi crisscrossed, and spear light flashed. It was hard for ordinary people to get close. Right at this moment, the rest of the soldiers also began to fight. The White Nightmare troops were indeed elites, 1 against 10, but they were only at a slight disadvantage. They were not suppressed, by the City Guard Division. Of course, the City Guard Division was not the Dong Yu troops from back then. Not to mention anything else, just in terms of weapons and equipment, the two sides were not on the same level. Therefore, although the White Nightmare troops were strong, if they encountered the Divine Martial Guards, they would most likely fall. As the battle progressed, the City Guard Division gradually gained the upper hand. The White Nightmare troops were also fierce. The City Guard Division tried to break through the defensive line several times to continue chasing Liu Bei, but they were beaten back every time. Each time, the White Nightmare troops gave it their all. Such morale and bravery was something that the current City Guard Division could not hope to achieve. The battle fell into a stalemate. The White Nightmare troops seemed to be on the verge of collapse, but they stubbornly held on. The longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for the City Guard Division. By now, the military seal had long lost its effect. As Zhao Sihu carried Chun Di, he also took the time to observe the battlefield. The more he watched, the uglier his expression became. Just as the two sides were fighting, the sound of horse hooves came from behind. Turning around, it was Ouyang Shaw personally leading the Divine Martial Guards to reinforce them. This time, the White Nightmare troops led by Chun Di were somewhat lacking. Under the combined forces of the Divine Martial Guards and the City Guard Division, they were beaten back again and again. In less than an hour, 1,000 White Nightmare troops were completely annihilated. In the nameless wilderness, 1,000 fierce warriors were slumbering here. In the end, only Chun Di was left, still fighting Zhao Sihu. It was a very tragic scene. General Chun Di, are you willing to surrender? Ouyang Shuo asked. Don't even think about it. Chun Di's reply was just as straightforward. He stabbed out with his spear, aiming for Zhao Sihu's life. Ouyang Shuo heard this and sighed in his heart. He did not want to continue fighting, send General Chun on his way. Yes. Hearing this, Zhao Sihu slashed forward with his saber, parrying the spear and using the momentum to escape the battle. At the same time, the Divine Martial Guards on the periphery raised their divine armed crossbows and fired 10,000 arrows. In an instant, Chun Di was shot like a hedgehog and fell to the ground dead. After Chun Di died, he left behind a book. Ouyang Shuo took a look and finally revealed a trace of smile. White Nightmare Elite Troop Training Technique Manual. After using, master the White Nightmare Elite Troop Training Technique. This trip was not in vain. Ouyang Shuo smiled. Let's go back. After such a long time, Liu Bei had long escaped without a trace. It was impossible to find him. As expected of a cockroach, he is really lucky. Ouyang Shuo sighed in his heart. Fortunately, after this battle, he had lost a few of Liu Bei's arms. Just as Ouyang Shuo led his troops back, a Bayan battleship sailed towards Shanghai City's fleet. Who is it? Stop. The battleship was stopped by the fleet that was still cleaning up the battlefield. We're on the same side. The Bayan battleship raised its golden dragon flag. A soldier on the deck said loudly, Jiangling City has an urgent military situation. I need to present it to the emperor. Please wait. After a round of interrogation, the messenger was sent to Dragon Head. What happened to Jiangling City? Zheng He asked, reporting to governor. Jiangling City has fallen a week ago. This general has come under the orders of Lord Feng Qiuhuang to inform the emperor and ask the emperor to make a decision as soon as possible. As the messenger spoke, he took out a secret letter. What? Jiangling City has fallen? Jia Su, who was at the side, jumped up in shock. What exactly happened? This. The messenger was somewhat hesitant. Seeing this, Zheng He said, Mister, let's wait for the emperor to come back and listen to what is going on. Jia Su was startled and came back to his senses. I was too rash. Chapter 715. The moment Ouyang Shuo returned, he was urgently invited to the war room by Zheng He. My lord, something has happened in Jiangling. Zheng He's expression was grave as he handed over the letter. Ouyang Shuo received the letter from Feng Qiuhuang and opened it. His brows gradually furrowed. He didn't expect that Jiangling City would really fall, and that it would fall so thoroughly. It all started from a week ago. When Ouyang Shuo killed Guan Yu, Zhou Yu's army had already arrived at Jiangling City. Close to 300,000 soldiers surrounded River Tomb City so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Outside Jiangling City, flags fluttered in the wind and spears stood tall. Early the next morning, the army launched a fierce attack on Jiangling, leaving no room for retreat. This was the largest battle in the Battle of Red Cliffs. It would decide the fate of both sides. The battle on the first day was nothing out of the ordinary. After suffering close to 10,000 casualties, Zhou Yu's army retreated like a receding tide. Jiangling City was still as sturdy as ever. It was the same on the second day. On the third day, just as Cao Cao's army let down their guard, the western gate of Jiangling City suddenly opened from the inside. The mutant army stationed at the western gate rebelled. Zhou Yu's army, which was long prepared, surged into Jiangling City. With Zhou Yu's intelligence, he knew that the battle 2 days ago was just a diversion. On the third day, Zhou Yu gathered his main force at the western gate, leaving the other 3 gates as empty shells. With superior forces and spies, Cao Cao's army was unstoppable. A disaster unfolded. General Cao Run, who was in charge of guarding the western gate, died on the spot. Caught off guard, Cao Cao's army ended up in a miserable state, suffering heavy losses. Fortunately, Cao Cao was decisive, and Feng Xiuhuang and the rest remained vigilant. At the last moment, they retreated from the northern gate and headed north. Cao Cao's destination was Yiling. Unexpectedly, Cao Cao's army suffered heavy losses on their way north. Zhou Yu had predicted that Cao Cao's army would flee to Yiling and had set up an ambush along the way. After a fierce battle, Cao Cao's army suffered heavy losses again. After paying a heavy price along the way, the remnants of Cao Cao's army finally made it to Yiling. At the start of the battle, there were more than 300,000 Cao soldiers, but in the end, only 150 to 60,000 managed to escape to Yiling and were killed. Di Chun and the rest naturally earn a lot. Their contribution points caught up to Ouyang Shuo and were ranked second. Of course, Zhou Yu's army did not come out unscathed. Whether it was the city guards led by Yi Lai or Feng Xiuhuang and Bai Hua, they were all elite troops of their respective territories. Zhou Yu's army suffered 50 to 60,000 casualties in their counterattack. Zhou Yu had already surrounded Yiling and was prepared to annihilate Cao Cao's army. If Yiling were to fall, the battle would end immediately, and Ouyang Shuo's golden record of invincibility would be broken. In that case, the crushing defeat of Xiongba and the others would be nothing. Cao Cao's army would be defeated. Zhou's army was. The ones who opened the city gates without permission were south of Rosy Clouds, Qin Fun, and Ruanping's army. He didn't know what tricks south of Rosy Clouds had used to gain Cao Ren's trust and let their army guard the west gate alone. This Yang, Chen Yang Shun, Chen Shan. S Yang Chao's Lu army. Yang Li Chen Yang Yang's Yang Chen's Su Yang Chun, Yang Feng's Yang's armies. Before leaving, Ouyang Shuo had instructed them to be wary of south of Rosy Clouds and the others. Their current actions were too unusual. With the intelligence of Feng Xiuhuang and the others, how could they not be vigilant? However, Feng Xiuhuang and the rest were insignificant in front of Cao Cao. Most importantly, they didn't have any proof that south of Rosy Clouds and the others would cause trouble. On top of that, Cao Cao's trusted general, Cao Run, was acting as a guarantor for the south of Rosy Clouds. With Cao Ren's support, the matter was ultimately left unsettled. Although Feng Xiuhuang and the rest were anxious, there was nothing they could do. They could only stay vigilant in the dark. That was how the calamity came about. The culprit, Cao Run, also learned his lesson and died in battle. As soon as the Battle of Jiangling ended, south of Rosy Clouds and the others knew that they could no longer do anything on the map. According to the rules of the battle, even if they had gained Zhou Yu's trust, they would not be able to attack Cao Cao's army, who was in the same camp. Opening the city gates without permission was already taking advantage of a loophole in the system. Moreover, They were also worried about Cao Cao's revenge. As such, south of rosy clouds and the rest simply opened the city gates. After completing their mission, they immediately committed suicide and left the map. To put it bluntly, south of rosy clouds and the rest's actions were a classic example of harming others without benefiting themselves. Even if they didn't gain anything from the battle, they still wanted to scam the alliance of mountains and seas. After this battle, Gaia would probably update the system to deal with their actions. After all, if everyone played like this, then the map would be too unpredictable. It would go against Gaia's original intentions. Before the patch was updated, the alliance of mountains and seas had become the victim, and they had suffered terribly. Cao Cao's mutant army was mainly composed of the lords of the alliance of mountains and seas. In this battle, including the city guards, they suffered heavy losses. The city guards even lost 2 division commanders, which showed how tragic the battle was. As the Battle of Jiangling came to an end, the direction of the battle became unclear. Conquering Jiangling did not mean that Sun and Lu's allied army would definitely win. Firstly, there were still hundreds of thousands of soldiers defending Yiling, and the city had sufficient rations. This was because Yiling was Cao Cao's rations transit point. The rations transported from the north and Jingzhou Commandery to Jiangling City had to pass through Yiling. Although Yiling's rations couldn't compare to Jiangling's, it could still support the army for half a month. On the contrary, as the victors, Zhou Yu's army was running low on rations. The rations transported from Wu Lin to the main camp were robbed by Zhao Sihu's city guards. Even the rations stored in Jiangling were burned by Cao Cao's order when the army retreated. The situation was awkward. As the victors, they had to face the situation of starvation. Helpless, Zhou Yu could only arrange for the army to gather rations from the various villages. It was easy to imagine what would happen when a starving army faced a defenseless commoner. From Jiangling to Yiling, hundreds and thousands of villages groaned under the iron hooves of the army. After all, Jingzhou was under Liu Biao's rule. Whether it was Cao Cao or Zhou Yu, they didn't feel any pity. As a general, feeding the soldiers under him was the most important task at hand. Otherwise, who would risk their lives for them? In troubled times, who would truly pity the commoners? On the other hand, Liu Bei, who hadn't been very successful before, took great care of the commoners. It was precisely because of this unusual action that Liu Bei made a name for himself. The poor commoners of Jingzhou had their rations confiscated by Liu Biao during the autumn harvest. Cao Cao came and plundered them again, even handing over the rations. Now, Zhou Yu's army came and plundered the commoners' rations. This winter was destined to be colder than the previous years for the commoners. What awaited them was either freezing to death or starving to death. If they didn't want to starve to death, they could only go up the mountains to dig up grass and gnaw on tree bark. In the cold winter, even grass and tree bark had become a luxury. Wherever the army passed, they left behind groups of refugees fleeing from the famine. Along the way, there would be many more tragedies. Selling sons and daughters, choosing people to devour. These were not rumors, but real facts. Without rations, it wouldn't be easy for Zhou Yu's army to take down Yiling. Apart from that, the Shanghai City fleet entrenched in the Red Cliffs was a hidden danger to Sun Lu's camp. With Liu Bei's pathetic escape, only the Jiangdong fleet was left. As for the Jiangdong Navy, they were almost completely wiped out by the Shanghai City fleet. If they didn't get rid of this hidden danger, it would be difficult to win this war. It was the Shanghai City fleet that won and lost. If Ouyang Shuo was at Jiangling City, it would be impossible for south of rosy clouds to make such a move. It could only be said that Ouyang Shuo had planted a mine for Jiangling for his own selfish reasons. Now, it was time for the Shanghai City fleet to repay their debt. In the war room on Dragonhead, what do you think we should do? After sorting out the situation in Jiangling, Ouyang Shuo threw the problem to Zheng He and Jia Su. Of course, it was mainly Jia Su. Zheng He was only a Navy commander-in-chief, so he still needed Jia Su's advice to influence the overall situation of the war. After all, Jia Su was a native. Ouyang Shuo's decision to bring Jia Su along was the right choice. Mister, please. Zheng, he was also straightforward and directly kicked the ball to Jiasu. Seeing this, Jiasu smiled bitterly in his heart, but he still couldn't refuse. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said, I'm afraid it will be difficult to break the siege of Yiling with just the ocean-going fleet. The only thing we can do now is to find another way. Jiasu immediately vetoed the idea of rushing to Yiling's aid. Ouyang Shua didn't mind. Shanghai City's navy was strong in water battles, but it was useless in defending the city. If they really went to help Yiling, they would be using their weakness to attack the enemy's strength. During this period of time, Ouyang Shua had more or less figured out Jiasu's style. This person's stratagem seemed bold and unconstrained, like an antelope hanging its horns, but it was actually traceable. Jiasu's most distinctive characteristic was that he was very good at using his side's strengths to the extreme. Whether it was the decapitation operation or the burning of Liu Bei's army, they were all embodiments of this thinking. As for the overall situation, broad strategic vision, sharp foresight, and deep understanding of the enemy, these were all necessary skills for a top tactician. Whether it was Jiasu or the already dead Guijia, they were all like this. Apart from that, Jiasu's other characteristic was his rationality, an extraordinary rationality. His starting point was to win. As for the process of winning and the cost of winning, they were not within his consideration. Because of this, he was misunderstood as a poison warrior by the outside world. Chapter 716. What does Mr. mean by finding a different path? Ouyang Shua asked. Attack the yellow dragon. Attack the redwood mulberry tree. Jiasu was unequivocal. Chai Sang's forces are currently empty. If he uses his troops appropriately, he should be able to defeat them in one strike. Once Chai Sang falls, the danger of Yiling will be resolved. Ouyang Shua smiled as he nodded and said, This solitude and Mr. happen to have the same thought. Pass down the order, quickly clean up the battlefield, rest for a day at the Red Cliffs, replenish supplies, and then set off for Firewood Mulberry. Yes. Zheng, he accepted the order and left. Ouyang Shua summoned a messenger and asked him to deliver a secret letter to Feng Xiaohuang. There were only 8 words in the letter. Defend for 10 days, and the situation will change. Xuanyang County, Chaolai Mulberry. The Yangtze River flows to the foot of Mount Lu and converges with Lake Poyang, thus reaching the ancient Chaising mulberry tree. This place was a collection of the beauty of Jiangnan, winding corridors and pavilions, empty mountain scenery, Miao Miao. Chaisang, now known as Zhejiang, was the main thoroughfare of the 9 rivers. It guarded the throat of the Yangtze River and was a battleground for military strategists. Before the Battle of Chibi, the Jiangdong group used Chaising Mulberry as their administrative center and stationed their troops there. Their goal was to kill Ancestor Huang. Zhou had been training the Jiangdong Navy at Poyang Lake for a long period of time. Huang Zhu was dead, but Chai Sang was still the focus of attention. After 5 days of sailing, the fleet finally arrived outside the kindling mulberry city. The fleet suddenly appeared in the mist. Ouyang Shua was clad in armor and holding his sword horizontally. He stood facing the water, his clothes fluttering in the wind. Send someone to inform Sun Quan and persuade him to surrender. I only want to exchange him for Zhou Yu. I am not willing to increase the number of killings. If he isn't willing, then let the common people accompany him in death. Ouyang Shua said coolly. Understood, Jiasu answered. Jiasu believes that Jun Shang will do what he says. He actually hopes that Sun Quan can be a bit more unyielding. The kindling mulberry city was built alongside and surrounded by water. For land forces, the kindling mulberry city was a tough nut to crack, but for ocean-going fleets, it was the easiest city to capture. As long as the fleet arrived at the kindling mulberry wall, the cannons would be able to blast the walls directly. Because of the natural cannons of the battleships, the cannonballs could pass the city walls in one fell swoop and explode within the city. No matter what, Chai Sang would not be able to block that kind of lethality. Therefore, when the golden dragon flag fluttered outside the kindling mulberry city, the city was shaken. They've come with ill intentions. What kind of battleship is that? This is simply unheard of. I'm guessing that they were the ones who defeated Governor Lu Su and General Huang Gai's army. Then we're in big trouble. Everyone in the kindling mulberry wall was in a state of panic. After a while, the envoy from Shanghai City delivered a letter of persuasion. When Sun Quan saw this, he tore it into pieces. How dare you bully the people of River East? City Lord Mansion, Conference Hall. The young Sun Quan sat at the head of the table with a serious expression on his face. The enemy has come. Does anyone have a good plan? Although he was angry, Sun Quan did not dare to underestimate the enemy. However, it was impossible for him to leave the city and surrender just like that. A king had his own dignity. Faced with Sun Quan's question, the civil and military officials looked at each other. The real generals of River East had already left for the expedition, leaving only 2 or 3 kittens in the firewood mulberry tree. How could they come up with any good strategy? The only important official, Zhang Zhao, was from the faction that surrendered. It was also Sun Quan's bad luck. Lu Sun, the cornerstone of the Wu Kingdom's later period and a great talent of his generation, was not valued by Sun Quan at the moment. He was grinding in a mountain leap instance dungeon 1,000 miles away, slowly accumulating experience. River East was no stranger to the fleet of Shanghai City. Lu Su's army and Huang Gai's army had both been defeated by this fleet. Recently, there was news that even Liu Bei's army had been defeated. No matter how they looked at it, they had no chance of winning. What's wrong? Have you been scared silly by the enemy? Sun Quan was dissatisfied and arrogant. The young king still could not restrain his arrogance. The officials in the hall were uneasy and did not dare to speak. Forgive us, my lord. Sun Quan was very dissatisfied. At this moment, a young man stood up and said, I can try. The young man suddenly became the focus of everyone present. At a glance, it turned out to be the only mutant lord in the camp, dragon seeking acupoint. Oh, what plan do you have? Sun Quan's expression softened. I have an old relationship with the mutants. I can try and persuade them to retreat. Dragon seeking acupoint patted his chest and said, but his eyes were looking at Zhang Zhao, who was standing first among the officials. In this battle, dragon seeking acupoint did not go to the extreme. He did not get involved with Xiong Ba and the others. Instead, he took a different path and led his army to Chaisang village alone, with the intention of subduing Zhang Zhao. Although Zhang Zhao had surrendered in the Battle of Chibi, his reason was reasonable. He was not really a coward. When Sun Tzu started his business, he was already a senior official in Sun Tzu's camp. He was well-versed in both civil and military affairs. Zhang Zhao was actually a rare talent, especially for dragon-seeking city. Zhang Zhao, who was well-versed in both civil and military affairs, was even more suitable. He could greatly improve the military and political level of dragon-seeking city. Dragon-seeking acupoint was not muddle-headed about this. During this time, dragon-seeking acupoint had used his talent in doing missions to bombard Zhang Zhao and had made good progress. However, Zhang Zhao still did not give a definite answer, which made dragon-seeking acupoint anxious. Jiang Dong's current predicament was an opportunity for dragon-seeking acupoint. Dragon-seeking acupoint believed that in order to help him subdue Zhang Zhao, Ouyang Shuo would give him face. The two of them could use this opportunity to eliminate their hostility, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. As expected, dragon-seeking acupoint's words made Zhang Zhao turn his head to look at him and nod. Seeing that, dragon-seeking acupoint was even more assured. Then go and give it a try. Sun Quan's expression was indifferent when he heard dragon-seeking acupoint's method. Firstly, Sun Quan did not have high hopes for it. The enemy had come from thousands of miles away. How could they retreat just because of 1 sentence? If it were him, he would not agree to it either. Secondly, Sun Quan always had some conflict with this kind of compromise method. Sun Quan was a ferocious tiger. Yes, dragon-seeking acupoint did not care what Sun Quan thought. He only wanted Zhang Zhao. Outside Chaisang village on Dragon Head. My lord, Chaisang village says that an old friend has come to visit, a guard reported. Old friend. Ouyang Shuo was confused. What was Sun Quan doing? Let him in. Yes. After a while, a mysterious man in a black robe followed the guard into the study. Ouyang Shuo was not interested in this kind of trick. The guard retreated, and the mysterious man lifted his hood. Naturally, it was Dragon Seeking Acupoint. Dragon Seeking Acupoint, it's you. This was indeed out of Ouyang Shuo's expectations. It's me. Dragon Seeking Acupoint smiled. He did not want to be recognized by the soldiers of Shanghai City, so he could only come wearing a black robe. Moreover, it was not a glorious thing to do. Seeing Dragon Seeking Acupoint, Ouyang Shuo was relieved. He was really worried that this person would get entangled with Di Chun and the others. If that was the case, it would be difficult. What is Sun Quan's intention in asking you to come here? Ouyang Shuo asked. Dragon Seeking Acupoint immediately cupped his fists and bowed. He said sincerely, "Big brother, please help me." What do you mean? Ouyang Shuo's expression was indifferent, but he was already on guard. It's like this. Dragon Seeking Acupoint explained the cause and effect of the matter in detail. Ouyang Shuo's smile disappeared when he heard it. People's hearts have changed after all. Ouyang Shuo calmed himself down and said patiently, Jiangling has fallen, and Yiling is in a state of emergency. Baiwa and Feng Xiaohuang might collapse at any time. I have to ask Sun Quan to call Zhou Yu back. Dragon Seeking Acupoint, do you understand? That's simple. Ask Sun Quan to issue a military order. Dragon Seeking Acupoint said. Ouyang Shuo shook his head. With Zhou Yu's intelligence, how could he not understand the principle of not obeying the emperor's orders? Zhou Yu can break through Yiling and come back to ask for orders. Zhou Yu will only rush back when Sun Quan is captured. Dragon Seeking Acupoint was speechless. After a long time, Dragon Seeking Acupoint's face was filled with hostility. He said with slight dissatisfaction, Big brother, can't you help me this once? I have already made a promise to Zhang Zhao. If I break it, everything will go down the drain. It's not that I don't want to help you, but there's nothing I can do. Ouyang Shuo's expression was indifferent. If Sun Quan surrenders, I can also capture Zhang Zhao and hand him over to you. How about it? If that's the case, how will Zhang Zhao submit? Dragon Seeking Acupoint was dissatisfied. Then what do you want me to do? Retreat? Watch Bai Hua and the others be defeated by Di Chun? Ouyang Shuo was a little angry. You are biased. Dragon Seeking Acupoint also lost his temper. He was as stubborn as a bull. You are so protective of Bai Hua and the others. Why don't you think about my feelings? I have followed you for the longest time, but you don't help me at all. You said that Shanghai City will not interfere with the Alliance's affairs during the long journey, and that we should fight our own battles. But why did you station an entire army in Heartstone City and not care about the survival of Dragon Seeking Acupoint? Could it be that my position in Big Brother's heart is not as important as that Brat Lao AI? Dragon Seeking Acupoint was already roaring at the end of his words. He vented all the accumulated dissatisfaction in his heart. Ouyang Shuo's expression did not change, but his face trembled a little. All right, it's good that you have spoken. You have finally spoken your mind, but you still can't let it go, right? That's right. Dragon Seeking Acupoint threw caution to the wind. I just want to ask, does Shanghai City have an obligation to help you? Humph. Dragon Seeking Acupoint did not listen to him at all. You take the help of others for granted. Once you don't help, it means that you're not being good to you and even resentment. Dragon Seeking Acupoint, you are really my good brother. Ouyang Shuo's tone turned cold. Don't make yourself so noble. Dragon Seeking Acupoint's eyes were filled with anger. You are helping us because you want us to be your shield against the Yanhuang Alliance. You are just using each other. Ouyang Shuo shook his head. He did not want to say anything more. Since it had come to this, there was no way they could be brothers. Since that is what you think, I have nothing to say. Ouyang Shuo paused for a moment and secretly warned, You are on your own. You don't need to worry about me. Goodbye. Dragon Seeking Acupoint's heart faintly flashed a trace of regret, but the expression on his face did not give way. He did not even put on his hood. He raised his neck and angrily left. Lord! Jiasu walked in. Pass down the order, bombard the Chai Sang gang. Ouyang Shuo coldly ordered. Yes. Jiasu nodded and turned to leave. Chapter 717. As soon as he entered the city, he was bombarded by cannons. Damn it, they're not giving me any face at all. He was too ashamed to return to the governor's mansion. He found a secluded corner in the city and went to lick his wounds. Sun Quan's expression was equally ugly. The cannons bombarded the city walls, creating holes. The River East soldiers who were guarding the city wall were mercilessly harvested like weeds, falling one after another. Especially the catapults on the city walls. They had become the main target of attack. The only thing that could threaten the warships in the kindling mulberry wall were the catapults. As for the navy stationed outside the kindling mulberry wall, they were completely paralyzed by the first round of attacks and fled back into the city. As the catapults were destroyed one after another, the defenders on the city walls lost all hope. Surrounded by water, the kindling mulberry wall became a clawless tiger, allowing the Shanghai city fleet to ravage it. The defenseless kindling mulberry wall had no choice but to retreat from the city walls. According to the words of the generals, standing on the city wall was just taking a beating. It was purely a suicide mission, and there was no meaning to it. The cannons continued for an entire day and only stopped in the evening. Shanghai City had spent 20 to 30,000 gold coins on the cannons alone, which made Ouyang Shua's heart ache. After the bombardment, the kindling mulberry wall was like a little girl that had been ravaged, riddled with holes and in ruins. Standing outside the city, one could clearly see the situation inside. If the cannons continued, the people in the city would be the ones to suffer. Although the kindling mulberry wall was River East, Sun Quan was not someone who was inflexible. He had thought of abandoning the city and escaping. As long as Zhou Yu's army broke through Yiling, the enemy would not be a problem. The problem was that the kindling mulberry wall was surrounded by water. The Shanghai city fleet covered the river, surrounding the kindling mulberry wall so tightly that not even a fly could escape. At this moment, the kindling mulberry wall was like an isolated island, isolated and helpless. As night fell, white smoke rose from the city. It was the smoke from cooking in every household. No matter how worried they were, they still had to fill their stomachs. But at the thought of being trapped for a long time, the housewives unconsciously scooped a little less rice. During the day, all the rice shops in the city had been sold out. The prices of all kinds of resources in the city had increased wildly, and there were already signs of chaos. As they ate the tasteless food, the commoners were terrified and uneasy. This was the first time that the people of the three countries truly felt the power and lethality of firearms. Such a heavy weapon was simply a killing machine in a chaotic world. That night, the common people of kindling mulberry tree passed in fear and trepidation. The next day, the sun rose. The bright and beautiful sunlight shone through the holes in the city wall into the kindling mulberry wall, casting spots of light. There was no one near the city walls. Whether it was the streets or the residences, they were all empty without a trace of life. Occasionally, a stray dog would pass by the street and dive into the ruins to search for leftovers. The people in the city did not sleep for the whole night, but no one dared to sleep in. They got up early and nervously prepared for a new round of artillery attacks. The people who lived near the city walls moved into the city overnight. If they had relatives, they could stay at their relative's house for the night. Those without relatives could only sleep on the streets or find a roof or a hole under a bridge. All the temples in the city became popular places to visit. In the cold winter, the north wind was biting cold. Sleeping on the streets, even with blankets to cover them, those with poor health would not be able to bear it. Interestingly, the commoners near the city walls evacuated overnight. The commoners, who were still a distance away from the city walls, immediately lost their composure when they saw that they had lost their shield. One by one, they also retreated into the city. The crowd mentality of the commoners was very serious. With someone taking the lead, it quickly triggered a second wave of moving houses. Because of this, everyone became even more anxious. The entire night, kindling mulberry wall was not truly peaceful. Late at night, there were still children who were woken up by their parents in their sleep. Braving the cold wind, They moved their families into the city overnight. The sound of dogs barking and children crying resounded intermittently for the entire night. What a torture! The commoners were miserable. All the temples in the city were immediately filled with people. Even a hole under the bridge became a popular place to visit. In order to fight for a good spot under the bridge, there was no lack of fists and kicks. It's all for survival. In the worst case, they could only sleep on the streets. The central street near the city lord's mansion was also filled with people. It was so densely packed that even horse carriages could not pass through. In the eyes of the commoners, the city lord's mansion was the safest place. No matter how heartless Sun Quan was, he could not bear to drive the commoners away. He had no one to talk to about the depression in his heart. That night, there were no less than 1,000 commoners who froze to death on the streets. Under the sunlight, the kindling mulberry wall was a tragic scene. Even a rare good weather in winter could not dispel the coldness in the commoners' hearts. Strangely, by 9 o'clock in the morning, the cannons had not arrived. Instead, a special envoy from Shanghai City entered the city for the second time. He conveyed Ouyang Shua's message. If Sun Quan did not leave the city and surrender before noon, the entire city would be slaughtered without mercy. Such a letter of persuasion was bloody. Furthermore, this time, the letters of surrender were no longer sent to Sun Quan in secret. Zheng He arranged for the soldiers on the city walls to announce it loudly and repeatedly. Countless letters of surrender were directly fired into the city through cannons. As such, the people in the city were agitated. The commoners of the three countries were no strangers to massacres. Naturally, they believed it. At the thought of the impending massacre, the commoners shuddered. In the face of the crisis, the commoners looked at the city lord's mansion with strange, worried, and resentful gazes. In fact, it was not only the commoners who felt strange. Even the eyes of the soldiers flickered. After all, most of the families of the soldiers lived in the kindling mulberry wall. Once the kindling mulberry wall fell, their families would be ruined. The will of the entire city was shaken by the letter of surrender. To the commoners, to live or to die, this was an extremely simple choice. Bastard. Sun Quan's face was livid. He could not block the news even if he wanted to. My lord, let's accept the other party's conditions. We have no other choice. Zhang Zhao once again firmly supported the side of surrender. He continued, if we continue to resist, we will only increase the number of casualties. Surrendering is a small matter, but if we lose the support of the people of River East, everything will be over. To be honest, Zhang Zhao was very knowledgeable. Compared to Zhou Yu, what Zhang Zhao lacked was an unparalleled view of the big picture, as well as sharp insight. That's the only way. Sun Quan sighed, his heart full of reluctance. In addition to worrying about losing the support of the people, Sun Quan was more worried about the mutiny of the soldiers. That was something more terrible than losing the support of the people. The Sun family could be sent to hell at any moment. Before the war, Sun Quan never thought that the iron wall of the Red Cliffs would fall. There were 50,000 to 60,000 soldiers stationed inside, and Lu Su's army and Huang Gai's army outside, but they still suffered a crushing defeat. One careless move, and the whole game would be lost. Xiongba and the other mutants are really useless. Before the war, they vowed to defeat the Shanghai City fleet in one fell swoop. But when the time came, they were wiped out. What a shame. Sun Quan had turned into a resentful woman. But no matter how he complained, he could not escape the humiliating fate of leaving the city to surrender. At noon, Sun Quan, dressed in white, held the official seal and led a group of civil and military officials out of the city to surrender. Ouyang Shua did not deliberately make things difficult for Sun Quan, nor did he do anything to humiliate Sun Quan. He respectfully invited Sun Quan to stay in the Dragon Head for the time being. After all, Ouyang Shua was still thinking of subduing Zhou Yu and the other Jiangdong generals. Wasn't insulting Sun Quan asking for a snub. General, please write a letter to Zhou Yu and have Zhang Zhao personally deliver it to Yiling. In the guest room, Ouyang Shua stated his request. As he spoke, someone had already presented a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. Sun Quan was an ambitious and ruthless person. Since he had surrendered, he did not intend to act shamelessly. He picked up the brush and wrote a letter in the blink of an eye. He stamped the letter with his official seal. Ouyang Shuo smiled in satisfaction and took the letter. Seeing that there were no problems, he immediately ordered someone to put it in a wooden box. Apart from Zhang Zhao, there was also a deputy general from the City Guard Division accompanying him to deliver the letter. With Zhang Zhao's help, Ouyang Shuo was not worried that Zhou Yu would cheat. Zhang Zhao was a smart man and would not dare to joke around with Sun Quan's life. Apart from Sun Quan's letter, Ouyang Shuo also wrote a letter to Zhou Yu. Not only did he express his admiration for Zhou Yu, but he also explained the purpose of the Battle of Chaising Mulberry. At the end, he added, General Sun's life is at the mercy of the public. Please reconsider. Zhou Yu would probably not know whether to laugh or cry when he saw this letter. How could there be such a way to recruit talents? Kidnapping a former master to threaten him was unheard of. This was simply a bandit. After sending off the messenger, the Shanghai City Fleet did not stay long at Chaising Mulberry. The next day, they set off for Red Cliff. The commoners of Chaising Mulberry heaved a long sigh of relief when they saw this. They had just taken a trip to the edge of hell. Ouyang Shuo decided to return to Red Cliff for two reasons. First, Red Cliff had sufficient rations and was convenient to resupply. Moreover, there was a water stockade, which made it convenient for the fleet to dock and reorganize. Second, Red Cliff was relatively close to Yiling. If necessary, they could return to Yiling at any time. Ouyang Shuo predicted that even if Zhou Yu withdrew his troops, Di Chun and the others would still cause some trouble. Therefore, the Shanghai City Fleet had to be prepared for another battle. This Battle of Red Cliff could be considered a series of setbacks. Ouyang Shuo was not worried that Di Chun would detain Zhou Yu or even kill him. This was because, according to the rules of war, mutant armies of the same faction could not attack the natives of the same faction. This was especially so for historical figures of the same faction. Gaia had special protective measures. This was also to prevent lords from harboring the dark mentality of, if I can't get it, no one else can. Otherwise, the historical figures of the battle map would suffer. Similarly, Ouyang Shuo naturally could not order the siege lions to kill Liu Bei, who had already escaped. On this point, both sides were fair. Chapter 718. More than a month had passed since the start of the campaign, and the Battle of Red Cliffs was nearing its end. Outside Yiling, Zhou Yu's encampment, hundreds of thousands of soldiers surrounded Yiling. As far as the eye could see, the undulating land outside the city was filled with black tents that stretched for miles. It was extremely noisy and dirty water flowed everywhere. The general's flag fluttered in the cold wind. A few lumberyards had been set up in the forest further away from the tents. Thousands of craftsmen were forcibly conscripted from Jiangling City, using the wood that was cut nearby to build all kinds of siege weapons. On the muddy road, there were also thousands of laborers who had been conscripted by force. They wore old and tattered clothes and walked against the cold wind as they gathered stones from deep in the mountains with great difficulty. They used simple carts to transport them to the battlefield. Outside the military camp, there was now a huge temporary military equipment processing base. Zhou Yu was not going to attack Yiling until he had enough siege weapons built, because he had no chance of winning. From time to time, scattered troops could be seen returning from foraging. The villages around Yiling had been swept clean by the army. Not a single grain was left. If the army wanted to gather more food, they had to travel to further villages. Most of the laborers in the encampment were volunteered by the people in the nearby villages. If they did labor, they could at least eat. If they did not, they could only wait for death when their families ran out of food. The dark cloud of a food crisis gradually loomed over Zhou Yu's army. Since yesterday, the army had started limiting food rations. The first to be squeezed were the craftsmen and laborers. They were forcibly conscripted. Not only were they unpaid, they could not even fill their stomachs. This was how the lives of the common people were in chaos. Similarly, the Chao army in Yiling was not having a good time. More than 100,000 soldiers were stationed in a small city. Even if they had stored food, it could not sustain the army's consumption. Running out of food became a common crisis for both sides. Now it all depended on who gave up first. Zhou Yu was very confident of this. After all, they had the upper hand and were able to gather some food every day. The Yiling garrison was running out of food. Zhou Yu was like a patient hunter, actively preparing his hunting tools and laying traps while waiting patiently for his prey to be at its weakest to deliver a fatal blow. Of course, that was if there were no other accidents. The fall of Chai Sang was the biggest accident and the biggest variable in the war. After traveling for more than 10 days, the warship carrying Zhang Zhao and the others finally docked at the river port outside of Yiling City. With the token from Sun Quan, Zhang Zhao and the rest were able to meet Zhou Yu without any trouble. Commander-in-Chief, Chai Sang is in trouble. Without hesitation, Zhang Zhao handed the letters written by Sun Quan and Ouyang Shua to Zhou Yu. Zhou Yu opened the letter, and the more he read, the uglier his expression became. When he was done, he let out a long sigh and said, "It's all my fault. I underestimated the Shanghai City fleet and overestimated Xiongba's plan." Commander-in-Chief, the enemy is too cunning, Zhang Zhao consoled. "Let's not talk about this anymore." Zhou Yu waved his hand. He didn't have a good relationship with Zhang Zhao, so he didn't want to show too much emotion in front of Zhang Zhao. He firmly said, "I'll issue the order right away. Break camp and return immediately." With Sun Quan captured, Zhou Yu had no choice but to return. As soon as the military order was given, the entire camp was in an uproar. The first to receive the military order were naturally the 20,000 River East elites under Zhou Yu's direct command. This force had been arranged by Zhou Yu as a reserve force during the attack on River Tomb City, so they didn't suffer too many losses. Zhou Yu wasn't stupid. He knew that if he didn't have a strong army, he wouldn't be able to suppress the mutant army that was 10 times their size. Di Chun and the others were happy to play dumb and use this opportunity to earn contribution points. The news of Zhou Yu's withdrawal reached Di Chen's ears in less than half an hour. Di Chen was shocked. He personally rushed to the central tent and asked, "Commander-in-Chief, why is this happening?" Zhou Yu sighed in his heart. He didn't dare to face Di Chen's question. With an ugly expression, he said, "Chai Sang has fallen, and the Lord has been captured. I have to rush back." "What? Chai Sang has fallen?" Di Chen was so shocked that he couldn't speak. "Take a look for yourself." Zhou Yu handed Sun Quan's letter to Di Chun. Could this be a trick? Di Chun still couldn't believe it. With General Zhang Zhao as the witness, how could it be a trick? Zhou Yu shook his head and introduced Zhang Zhao to Di Chun. Seeing this, Di Chen's heart sank. "So Dai Wui still can't beat you to my heart's content after all?" Di Chun was conflicted. He still didn't want Zhou Yu to withdraw his army just like that. He said emotionally, "Commander-in-Chief, the preparations for the siege are almost done. We're about to take Yiling. Isn't it a pity to withdraw now? There's no other way. The Lord is in the enemy's hands." Zhou Yu also felt a little regretful. "Commander-in-Chief, I can guarantee that Dai Wui won't dare to do anything to General Sunday. Don't forget that his subordinates are still in Yiling. We can't afford to hurt them," Di Chen said. "Moreover, Yiling is so far away from Chai Sang. It'll take more than half a month to go back and forth. As long as we make use of the time difference, we can definitely take Yiling first." For a moment, Zhou Yu was tempted. After thinking for a while, Zhou Yu reluctantly refused. He shook his head and said, "No, I can't gamble with the Lord's safety. That's too risky. It's not something an official should do." If the hostage was someone else, Zhou Yu would probably take the gamble. But it was Sun Quan. Zhou Yu didn't dare to gamble. "Commander-in-Chief, I didn't come alone to deliver the letter. There are other generals from Shanghai City. I'm afraid that some of them have already entered Yiling," Zhang Zhao added from the side. "How foolish." Di Chun was exasperated. It was easy to imagine how excited Yiling would be when they heard the news of Chai Sang's fall. Even if they had thought of retreating before, they would probably defend to the end now. If they really hardened their hearts, it wasn't as if the army couldn't find food in the city. It wouldn't be a problem for them to hold out for 10 days to half a month. In history, There had been a lone city that had held out for more than a year and remained standing. At this point, Di Chen knew that it was probably impossible to keep Zhou Yu here. His expression was uncertain. Seeing this, Zhou Yu let out a long sigh. Retreat. Di Chen suddenly raised his head. His eyes were resolute and full of fighting spirit. He said, "No, I will never retreat. Are you going to disobey? Commander-in-Chief, I'm sorry. I can't comply. You have your choice, and we have ours. This time, we must take Yiling." Di Chen was determined. "How dare you?" Zhang Zhao rebuked. "As you wish." Zhou Yu looked tired. He waved his hand, signaling Di Chen to leave. Di Chen stubbornly left. In the end, they parted on bad terms. "Commander-in-Chief, how can you tolerate the mutants?" Zhang Zhao was a little agitated. He had never seen anyone who dared to disobey a military order so openly. "So what if I don't agree? The mutants' army is several times larger than ours. We can't force them." In the end, the right to speak in the army depended on the strength of the army. Zhang Zhao was speechless when he heard that. As someone who had led troops before, how could he not understand this logic? Some of the people in the tent became quiet. The next day, Zhou Yu led the River East soldiers on their way back. Di Chen led nearly 200,000 mutants and prepared to attack Yiling. Thus, the two armies parted ways. Just as the army was about to set out, a small incident occurred. The general of Shanghai City, who came with Zhang Zhao, made a request to Zhou Yu. He wanted Zhou Yu to leave on a warship and hand over the River East army to another general. "Don't go too far." Zhou Yu couldn't say anything, but Zhang Zhao couldn't help it. How is this an invitation? It was clearly a detention and imprisonment. "I'm only following orders. Please don't make things difficult for me." The general of Shanghai City was neither servile nor overbearing. "My lord has said that for the sake of General Sun's safety, I hope that you will understand." "You." Zhang Zhao was infuriated by this blatant threat. "Since this is Commander Wui's request, then I shall accept it. Speaking of which, I was just about to see your huge warship." Zhou Yu was rather open-minded and didn't mind. He turned to Zhang Zhao and said, "General Zhang, please lead the troops back." "Yes." Zhang Zhao nodded helplessly. Ouyang Shuo did this because he had no other choice. He didn't dare to underestimate Zhou Yu, who knew what would happen if he let Zhou Yu lead the army. Therefore, the best way was to invite Zhou Yu to the warship. This was also a way to protect Zhou Yu. Ouyang Shuo didn't dare to determine if there were still Di Chen's men in Cao Cao's mutant army. He didn't want anything to happen to Zhou Yu. In order to get Zhou Yu, Ouyang Shuo had put in a lot of effort. In a certain mansion in Yiling City, when Bai Hua and the rest received the secret letter from Ouyang Shuo, they could finally relax a little. "Wui really didn't disappoint us." Feng Xiuhuang revealed a smile. During this period of being trapped in Yiling City, they had been under a lot of pressure. It's just that we have been reduced to supporting roles in this campaign. Feng Xiuhuang was a little stubborn. When Ouyang Shuo decided to follow the fleet, Feng Xiuhuang's heart was filled with vigor. She wanted to use this rare opportunity to prove herself. She didn't expect to lose to a mole. Although the rebellion of south of Rosy Clouds and the rest had nothing to do with Feng Xiuhuang, she still felt very sullen. Bai Hua glanced at Feng Xiuhuang and said indifferently, "I'm guessing that Di Chen definitely won't surrender obediently. That guy is so focused on defeating Wui on the battlefield that he's almost possessed. It wasn't easy for him to win half a round against us. How can he give up so easily?" Feng Xiuhuang also saw through Di Chen. She changed the topic and said with killing intent, "If we can't even deal with Di Chen, then we don't deserve to be Wui's allies." "That's right." Bai Hua nodded. His expression was indifferent, but the killing intent in his heart wasn't any weaker than Feng Xiuhuang's. "It's time to have a good fight with Di Chen. We have to settle the score with south of Rosy Clouds." The two women, or rather, the demonesses, surprisingly reached an agreement on this matter. "Then we have to plan properly." Feng Xiuhuang smiled. Although the two women had different personalities, they had the same unwillingness to admit defeat. Chapter 719. Another week passed. In the Red Cliff Water Bandits, Ouyang Shuo finally waited for Zhou Yu and his entourage. Although the meeting was not a pleasant one, Ouyang Shuo was still very happy. He kept his promise and let Sun Quan return to the Red Cliff. Zhou Yu was also a man of his word. Although he was loyal to the Sun clan, and although he was very unwilling, he had no choice but to obey Ouyang Shuo and join Shanghai City. Ouyang Shuo smiled in satisfaction and checked Zhou Yu's attributes. Name, Zhou Yu, Imperial level, Dynasty. Late Eastern Han Dynasty identity. General of Shanghai City occupation. Special General loyalty. 60 Commander. 91 Martial power. 68 Intelligence. 85 Politics. 85 Specialty. Proficient in both land and water. Increases naval power by 20. Military morale by 30. Strategy success rate by 30. Enemy morale reduced by 15. Evaluation. Gong Jin has the qualities of a king. Courageous and astute. Knowledgeable in both civil and military matters. Magnanimous and magnanimous. Once supported the country in his youth. Only Zhou Yu was able to do so. A hero of the world. The husband of Jiang's Wufeng. Qi Beidu, famous in Dong Yuwu. Youth returned to the earth, making people sigh when he was mentioned. Because he was forced to submit, Zhou Yu's loyalty was only 60 points, the lowest among the generals. If it was lower than 60 points, it meant that he was disloyal. Ouyang Shuo was not worried about this. After returning to the main map, Zhou Yu's loyalty would naturally rise. As someone who had been reborn, Ouyang Shuo knew very well that among the three heroes of the three kingdoms, only Liu Bei appeared in the wilderness. Sun Quan and Cao Cao were both hidden in the wilderness and did not appear. Without the Sun clan on the main map, Ouyang Shuo had reason to believe that Zhou Yu would submit to Shanghai City's foundation and Ouyang Shuo's personal charm. Ouyang Shuo wasn't on the same level as the dragon-seeking acupoint technique and the others. Among Zhou Yu's four-dimensional attributes, other than martial power, which was on the low side, his other three attributes were all top-notch among the imperial generals. His commander attribute had broken through the shackles of 90 points. His politics attribute was comparable to a civil official. Thus, Zhou Yu could be considered a scholarly general. Looking at his four-dimensional attributes, he was only one step away from becoming a divine general. Although there were many dazzling generals during the Three Kingdoms period, Gaia's evaluation system did not produce a single divine general. Compared to the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period, which was also a time of war, it was incomparable. One of these points was that the generals of this period were more than brave and fierce, but their military thinking was slightly lacking. Many of the generals of the Three Kingdoms were born in the wilderness, and some of them were not even considered poor. They did not have the opportunity to study the art of war, and could only slowly gain experience from the actual war. Therefore, they were not like the generals of the Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods, who were not only good at war, but were also the founders and practitioners of the military doctrine. Even the god of slaughter, Bai Qi, was better at military affairs than Zhou Yu and the others. During the Three Kingdoms period, Cao Cao was the one who truly achieved military success. Cao Cao was proficient in the art of war. He read the works of Sun Wu, Wu Qi, and the other military strategists of the previous generation. Based on his study of the art of war, he wrote the Book of War. His book, Sun Tzu's Brief Explanations, was the first to organize and annotate the 13 chapters of Sun Tzu. It enriched and developed China's ancient military theory. Unfortunately, Cao Cao was considered a human lord and was not included in Gaia's evaluation system for generals. If not, Cao Cao would have been the most likely to be evaluated as a divine general in the Three Kingdoms. Below Cao Cao were Zhou Yu and Zhou Gongjin. In the process of deifying Zhuge Liang in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Zhou Yu became a huge and solid stepping stone. The Zhou Yu in the novel was worlds apart from the real Zhou Yu in the historical novel. The Zhou Yu in history was suave, handsome, and talented. He was far from the narrow-minded and jealous character described by Luo Guanzhou. Zhou Yu's versatility made countless young girls and married women fall in love with him. Compared to Pan Yin, he was even better. Pan Yin only had looks, while Zhou Yu was talented and good-looking. There was a poem to prove it. In order to gain Zhou Yu's attention, I often play the zither by mistake. The real Zhou Yu was not only not narrow-minded, he was broad-minded. The old General Cheng Pu relied on his seniority. At first, he often bullied Zhou Yu, but Zhou Yu did not mind. Later on, Cheng Pu finally admired Zhou Yu from the bottom of his heart. He said, "Being friends with Zhou Gongjin is like drinking wine without feeling drunk." The poets of the Tang and Song dynasties all praised Zhou Yu. Su Shi praised him in Remembering Your Charming Maiden. Remembrance of the Crimson Cliffs. Thinking back to Gongjin's years, little Qiao was married for the first time, looking valiant and heroic. With a feather fan and silk handkerchief, amidst conversation, the oars were reduced to ashes. Even Liu Bei said, "Gongjin's literary and military strategies are the cream of the crop. Although he is broad-minded, he will not be a subject for long." Clearly, the description of him being narrow-minded was purely Luo Guanzhong's need to deify Zhuge Liang. Without Zhou Yu's narrow-mindedness and jealousy, how could he embody Zhuge Liang's heroic bearing? The most eye-catching Zhuge Liang's 3-Qi Zhou Yu in the novel was complete nonsense. Of course, Zhou Yu was not angered to death by Zhuge Liang. There were no traces of the 3-Qi Zhou Yu. After the Battle of the Crimson Cliffs, Zhou Yu was poisoned when he attacked Nanjun. When he reached Bachu, the arrow wound acted up and he died young. Strictly speaking, Zhou Yu and Zhuge Liang were not on the same level at that time and could not be compared. When Zhou Yu helped Sun Wu establish River East, Kong Ming was still wandering and living in seclusion. When Zhou Yu's name shook River East and he became one of the founding fathers of the Sun family, Zhuge Liang was still far from making his debut. This was not to belittle Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang was indeed talented, but it was after Zhou Yu's death that Zhuge Liang truly rose to prominence. While Zhou Yu was recovering from his poisoning, he suggested Sun Quan to put Liu Bei under house arrest. At the same time, he formulated a military plan to attack Yizhou. This plan was approved by Sun Quan, but he died before it could be implemented. It was foreseeable that if Zhou Yu had not died young, Shu Han would not have had a chance. Ouyang Shuo was well-versed in the history books and often applauded Zhou Yu's graceful bearing. It was not difficult to understand why Ouyang Shuo racked his brains to get Zhou Yu. For Zhou Yu, Ouyang Shuo even gave up the opportunity to kill Sun Quan and end the war. The position of Naval Admiral of the North Sea Bay Fleet was specially reserved by Ouyang Shuo for Zhou Yu. After accepting Zhou Yu, Ouyang Shuo released the 5 generals Lu Su, Huang Gai, Lu Meng, Zhou Tai, and Gan Ning, and allowed them to meet Zhou Yu. Zhou Yu didn't know whether he should be happy or worried when he saw them again. In this battle, the most outstanding generals of the River East Navy had been wiped out by Ouyang Shuo. They wouldn't be lonely after returning to the main map. The River East faction would become a force to be reckoned with in Shanghai City's navy. As for arrangements for Lu Su and the others, they would have to wait until they returned to the main map. After the handover, the Shanghai fleet did not linger at Chibi. They immediately headed for Yiling. They weren't going to Yiling to assist in the war, but to receive their rewards. In fact, the Battle of Chibi had already ended 4 days ago. Baiwa, Feng Xiaohuang, Di Chun, and the others had all returned to the main map. Shanghai City was the last to be left behind. The cause of the matter had to be traced back to the Battle of Yiling. After Zhou Yu led his troops away, there was a disturbance within the Dichen Corporation. The departure of the representative Zhou Yu not only weakened the strength of the army, but more importantly, affected the morale of the army. Some of the lords were no longer as resolute and wavered, especially the lords who weren't loyal to Di Chun. They didn't have much hope of winning the war. Because of this, Di Chun had to speed up the preparations for the siege. That day, Di Chun ordered the army to scavenge for rations for the last time. At the same time, a large number of laborers and craftsmen were needed to speed up the construction of siege weapons. Time was tight, and the task was heavy. A large number of soldiers were sent out, and the huge barracks became empty. That afternoon, Baiwa and Feng Xiaohuang, who had been patiently waiting, finally made their move. Once they made their move, they didn't leave any leeway, hoping to give the enemy a fatal blow at the most unlikely time. In fact, they did. At around 3 in the afternoon, the north gate that had been closed for half a month suddenly opened. Shanghai City, Lingxi City, Luofeng City, and Wanshe City, a total of more than 70,000 soldiers, all rushed out. Apart from them, there were no other lords' armies. It was clear that Baiwa and the others had learned their lesson from the rebellion in the south of Rosy Clouds, and they used the army of the Shanghai Alliance, preparing to stake it all on this one attack. Even more cleverly, Feng Xiaohuang and the others didn't choose to attack Sun Lu's mutant army. Instead, their target was the Dichun tribe. The 20,000 soldiers were responsible for guarding the perimeter, while the remaining 50,000 elite cavalrymen were like a pack of hungry wolves, fiercely and swiftly charging into the Dichun tribe's barracks. The completely unprepared Dichun tribe was caught unprepared, and in an instant, they suffered heavy losses. Under the charge of the 50,000 elite cavalrymen, the Dichun tribe, which had less than 15,000 soldiers, was quickly routed. Seeing this, the various armies that had received the news and rushed over to reinforce the Dichun tribe immediately had different thoughts. Since the main fighter, Dichun tribe, had already withdrawn from the battle, why should they continue fighting? With this thought, the reinforcements that they had expected became insincere, and they began to put on an act. Just like that, the Allies could only watch as the Dichun tribe was slaughtered by the enemy, and not even 10% of them survived. Feng Xiaohuang and the others weren't greedy. After destroying the Dichun tribe, they immediately returned to the city and left, leaving behind a ruined barracks and an ashen-faced Dichun. "I'm not worthy of your help," Dichun roared in the ruins. After this defeat, the Dichun tribe had less than 2,000 soldiers left, and they had completely lost their right to speak in the Allied army. In Sun Lu's camp, the lords of the Shanghai Alliance were lobbying. The plan to attack Yiling was completely ruined. The siege of Yiling was thus resolved. At the same time, it announced that the Battle of Red Cliffs, which had lasted for nearly 2 months, had finally come to an end. Chapter 720. On the way to Yiling, Ouyang Shuo checked the contribution points and ranking. Battle announcement. The Battle of Chibi has officially ended. Congratulations to the Chao camp for successfully reversing history. Each lord of the Chao camp will be rewarded with 2,000 contribution points. The total contribution points of the lords of the Chao camp will be increased by 50. Friendly reminder. The extra contribution points will not be counted in the contribution points ranking. Battle announcement. The Battle of Chibi has officially ended. Based on the contribution of the players to the camp and their contribution to the campaign, the extra contribution points will be calculated. System notification. Player not wearing. The representative of the Chao camp defeated the armies of Lu Su, Huang Gai, and Liu Bei, occupied the Red Cliffs, and captured Chaising Village. All of these have contributed greatly, and you will be rewarded with an additional 50,000 contribution points. Ouyang Shuo checked and finally settled on the contribution points ranking. Rank, name, contribution points, first place, how do I have no clothes, 250,000 points second. Emperor Chun, 200,000 points third. Siege Lion, 180,000 points fourth. Feng Xiaohuang, 175,000 points fifth. White Birch, 170,000 points 6th. Wandering Fantasy, 150,000 points 7th. Lord Chunshin, 140,000 points 8th. Military Kill, 135,000 points 9th. Sparks, 85,000 points 10th. And the Big Bad Wolf, 75,000 points on the ranking list. Tyrant and Wolf Warrior were beheaded. For the first time, they were not in the top 10. They were the most miserable pair. Siege Lion captured Wuling County with the help of the surrendered army. For the first time, he was in the top 3. Finding the Dragon Acupuncture Point was also like drawing water with a sieve. Sparks and I Am the Big Bad Wolf were in the top 10 again. As for south of Rosy Clouds, Qin Fun and Ruan Ping, they brought this upon themselves. He just didn't know how they would feel when they found out the outcome of the battle. Ouyang Shuo would have to settle this score with them when he returned to the main map. Compared to the previous battles, the contribution points of the lords in the Battle of Chibi had shrunk. Even Ouyang Shuo, who was at the top, only got 250,000 contribution points, including 50,000 points as an extra reward. The reason for this was that even though this battle was full of twists and turns and took up a lot of time, there were very few large-scale battles. Even in the battle to attack Jiangling, it was all thanks to the traders. There were almost no truly bitter battles or great battles. As such, it was naturally impossible to generate a large number of contribution points. A part of Ouyang Shuo's contribution points came from killing Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Qin Ji, and the other generals. Otherwise, his contribution points would be even lower. Di Chun might even snatch the first place. In the end, Ouyang Shuo only obtained 200,000 contribution points after deducting the cost of reviving the army. If converted into achievement points, it would be 20,000 achievement points. Ouyang Shuo no longer cared about such a small amount of merit points. On the other hand, Di Chun, Feng Xiaohuang, Bai Hua, Lord Chunshin, and the others had all been promoted to first-rank marquises. Ouyang Shuo's greatest gain from the battle this time was that he had subdued Zhou Yu, Jia Su, and the other valiant generals, including Lu Su and the others. This was Ouyang Shuo's greatest harvest so far. If word of this got out, it would probably shock everyone. After checking the contribution points, Ouyang Shuo checked the attributes of Lu Su and the others. Although Lu Su, Huang Gai, Lu Ming, Gan Ning, and Zhou Tai were all king-level generals, their attributes were worlds apart. Among them, Lu Su and Lu Ming were the most outstanding generals, followed by Huang Gai. Gan Ning and Zhou Tai ranked last. It could even be said that a general like Zhao Sihu was almost on par with Zhou Tai. Name: Lu Su, king level, dynasty, late Eastern Han Dynasty, identity, general of Shanghai City, occupation, high-rank general, loyalty, 60 commander, 70 martial strength, 60 intelligence, 80 politics, 75 specialty, going to battle alone, increases attack power by 20, morale by 25, cultivation method, omitted equipment, six-faced Han sword. Remarks: he is a strict person, does not care about decorations, is frugal both inside and outside, and does not care about worldly pursuits. Although he is in the army, he does not let go of books. He is also good at conversing, knows how to use words, and has great foresight. Name: Huang Gai, king level, dynasty, late Eastern Han Dynasty, identity, general of Shanghai City, occupation, high-rank general, loyalty, 60 commander, 75 martial strength, 80 intelligence, 65 politics, 55 specialty. Burning Red Cliff, increases attack power by 18, marching speed by 18, cultivation method, omitted equipment. Iron Whip. Remarks: Gai Xiaogu, a young infant, has experienced many hardships, but has great ambition. Although he is poor, he does not regard himself as ordinary. He often spends his spare time studying and talking about military affairs. He is a tiger official who defends his master, attacks the enemy, and stabilizes the country. Name: Lu Ming, king level, dynasty, late Eastern Han Dynasty, identity, general of Shanghai City, occupation, high-rank general, loyalty, 60 commander, 78 martial strength, 7 intelligence, 75 politics, 65 specialty. Crossing the river in white, increases attack power by 20, morale by 15. Cultivation method, omitted equipment. Long halberd. Remarks: Lu Ming is courageous and decisive, understands military strategies, cunning, and captured Guan Yu. Although he acted rashly in the beginning, he restrained himself in the end. He has the courage of a national warrior, not just a general. Name: Gan Ning, king level, dynasty, late Eastern Han Dynasty, identity, general of Shanghai City, occupation, high-rank general, loyalty, 60 commander, 72 martial strength, 84 intelligence, 50 politics, 25 specialty. Light Knight, increases attack power by 15, marching speed by 20, cultivation method, omitted equipment. Broadsword plus halberd plus iron chain. Remarks. Although Ning is rough and violent, he is smart and resourceful. He is dismissive of wealth and respects his subordinates. He can raise strong soldiers who are happy to serve him. He is a tiger official. Name, Zhoutai, king level, dynasty. Late Eastern Han dynasty, identity. General of Shanghai City, occupation. High-rank general, loyalty. 60 commander. 68, martial strength. 82 intelligence. 45 politics. 30 specialty. Savior, increases attack power by 15, marching speed by 15. Cultivation method. Omitted equipment. Broadsword, remarks. Zhoutai of Wu is as good as Su Chu of Wei and Zhao Yun of Shu. What a strong man. Not only did he save Quan, but he also saved Su Sheng. Zhong Mao could be said to be a confidant. After returning to the main map, Ouyang Shuo arranged for the 6 River East generals, including Zhou Yu, to join the Nanyang Navy. Compared to the army, the Navy had caught up in terms of size and equipment. What they lacked now were the generals in the army, and they were lacking by quite a bit. The addition of Lu Meng and the others could greatly increase the Nanyang Navy's combat power. After the battle ended, Jia Su finally expressed his intention to submit to Ouyang Shuo on the way back to Yiling. Ouyang Shuo was overjoyed. At this point, Ouyang Shuo's main objectives for the battle had been achieved. Name, Jia Su, Emperor level, dynasty. Late Eastern Han dynasty, identity. Shanghai City Councilor, occupation. Special Class Counselor, loyalty. 75 commander. 80 force. 45 intelligence. 90 politics. 85 specialty. Strategy, increases success rate of strategy by 35, increases morale of troops by 30, increases grasp of battle opportunities by 30, reduces enemy morale by 15. Works. Sun Tzu's Art of War, a volume. Remarks. Gods have no merit, and men have no trace. Ku Yuliang and Ping Zhiqi dealt with heroes and returned late to the founding father. Only their intelligence was deep, and they were faster than others, so they could not be trapped. Counselors were ingenious in devising strategies, combining power and change, and turning defeat into success. From the Qin and Han dynasties to the Zhou and Sui dynasties, counselors rose to prominence in Zhongliang and Qinping. Zhongliang was a sage counselor, and Qinping was a god-level counselor. During the Three Kingdoms period, counselors ushered in another period of concentration and explosion. The top counselors of the Three Kingdoms period included Sun Yu, Guijia, Jiasu, Sima Yi, and Sheng Yu of the Wei Kingdom, Zhou Yu, Lu Su, and Lu Sun of the Wu Kingdom, Zhuge Liang, Pang Tong, and Fa Zheng of the Shu Kingdom. Others such as Tian Feng, Zhu Shu, Su Shu, Chen Gong, and others could be considered elites among counselors. Sima Yi, Zhou Yu, Lu Su, Lu Sun, and Zhuge Liang all held military positions, so they could not be considered pure counselors. Just like Zhou Yu and Lu Su, they were classified as generals by Gaia. Gaia's rating of historical figures, in addition to considering their personal ability and their contributions to the dynasty, also placed historical figures in the same occupation for the next 5,000 years. Take counselors as an example. Zhang Liang was one of the top counselors, so he was rated as a saint. Similarly, because of the rarity of counselors, Jia Su, Sun Yu, Cheng Yu, Pang Tong, Fa Zheng, and other counselors were all classified as emperor-level counselors by Gaia. As for Sun Yu, Guijia, and Fa Zheng, they were listed as god-level counselors. In terms of ability, Zhou Yu was above Guijia and the others, but since he was listed as a general, he could only be ranked as an emperor-level general. This was because in the 5,000 years of China, there had been no shortage of famous generals and ministers. In history, the competition between the two occupations of generals and civil officials was the most intense. It was not difficult to understand why many famous generals were classified as emperor-level or even king-level. It was the same for civil officials. Even Fan Zhongyan could only be ranked as a king-level counselor. Chapter 721. After a while, the Shanghai fleet finally docked outside Yiling. Upon receiving the news, Cao Cao personally led his generals to welcome them. Cao Cao gave a thumbs up. "How can you say that you have no clothes?" Ouyang Shuo smiled and bowed. "You flatter me, Prime Minister. I heard that your captain died on the battlefield." Cao Cao's expression changed. Without waiting for Ouyang Shuo's reply, he continued, "How about I entrust Tiger Fanatic to you?" Tiger Fanatic was Su Chu, Cao Cao's bodyguard and captain. Ouyang Shuo was shocked. It seemed that Cao Cao knew that he had to retire in the wilderness. Thinking of this, he bowed deeply again and said, "Then I'll accept your invitation." Cao Cao entrusted Su Chu not only because of Ouyang Shuo's position in the wilderness, but also because of Xia Hoing. No matter what, Xia Hoing was Cao Cao's relative and trustworthy. Su Chu, who was standing behind Cao Cao, looked reluctant. Under Cao Cao's constant signals, he slowly stepped forward and bowed to Ouyang Shuo. "Greetings, my lord. General, please rise." Ouyang Shuo helped Su Chu up. He still felt a little sad when he thought of Chun Daming's death. Name, Su Chu, king level, alias, Tiger Fanatic Dynasty, late Eastern Han Dynasty identity, General of Shanghai City, occupation, Advanced General loyalty, 65 Commander, 70 Force, 86 Intelligence, 45 Politics, 25 Specialty, Brave, increases troop attack power by 25, increases troop speed by 15, skill omitted. Equipment, longsword evaluation. Su Chu is cautious and follows the law. He is a man of few words. He is loyal and talented. Standing in front of Ouyang Shuo, Su Chu was more than 8 feet tall and had a wide waist. He looked brave and brave. Su Chu is a real big guy. Just by standing there, he gave people a sense of oppression. However, Su Chu was not a simple-minded person. Chen Shou describes Su Chu as cautious and follows the law. He is a man of few words. Let me tell you something. Cao Ren came from Jingzhou to pay his respects. Cao Cao had not yet come out of his bedroom. Cao Ren met Su Chu outside the hall and invited him to sit down in a side room. Su Chu only said one sentence. "The king of Wei is coming out soon." Then he turned around and went back into the hall to avoid incurring Cao Ren's hatred. Someone asked Su Chu, "Cao Ren is an important minister of the royal family. Why did you refuse to talk to him?" Su Chu replied, "Although he is an important minister, he is also a general who guards the border. I, Su Chu, am in charge of internal security. If we want to talk, we can do it in public. There's no need to talk in private." When Cao Cao heard about this, he liked Su Chu even more and was promoted to a central general. This kind of general was brave and knew his duty. Moreover, he was loyal. He was the best choice for the emperor's imperial bodyguard. It was no wonder that Su Chu was still trusted by Cao Pai after Cao passed away. Cao Cao's act of entrusting Su Chu also reflected his fondness for Su Chu. After entrusting everything, Cao Cao finally brought up the issue of the military reward. He smiled and said, "Tell me, what reward do you want? As long as I have it, I can give it to you." It was rare for Cao Cao to be open-minded for once. Hearing Cao Cao's words, Ouyang Shuo had an urge to kill Chengyu. However, when he thought about how Jia Su had just pledged allegiance to Cao Cao, it would not be good if Chengyu and Jia Su fought. In the end, Ouyang Shuo made the request that he had thought about from the beginning. "I want to ask the Prime Minister for a person." "Who is it?" Cao Cao's gaze swept across Chengyu, Cao Zhen, Eugene, and the others. In Cao Cao's opinion, Ouyang Shuo probably wanted these fierce generals and strategists around him. "It's a songstress. Her name is Jiao Chan." "What?" Cao Cao did not react for a moment. He then laughed and stroked his beard. He pointed at Ouyang Shuo and said, "I can't tell that you love beauties more than fierce generals." Ouyang Shuo smiled and did not refute. 12 years after Lu Bu's death, which was the 15th year of Jianin, 2 years after the end of the Battle of Red Cliffs, Cao Cao built the Bronze Sparrow Pavilion in Yi City. He used various performers to practice singing and dancing, including Jiao Chan. Ouyang Shuo wanted Jiao Chan firstly. It was to complete the previously triggered B-level storyline mission for beauties. Secondly, it was because he had his eyes on the fierce General Lu Bu. He wanted to subdue him on the main map. No one would doubt that Lu Bu was the most valiant person in the Three Kingdoms. However, Lu Bu was valiant but lacking in strategy. He was short-sighted, greedy, and lustful. He did not see the big picture. He could be a general, but he was not good enough to be a vassal. Lu Bu himself had a clear understanding of this. During the Three Kingdoms period, Lu Bu had been a vassal and had fought Cao Cao head-on. No matter what, Lu Bu was not a fool. Such a Lu Bu would naturally be useful in Shanghai City. In comparison, it was understandable that Ouyang Shuo would give up on a fierce general like Eugene. After all, Shanghai City was filled with famous generals. What it lacked was a pure, fierce general like Lu Bu. Other than that, Lu Bu still had a few generals under him. If Lu Bu came to Shanghai City, he might be able to give Ouyang Shuo a surprise. It was unknown how Gaia operated. Perhaps Ouyang Shuo was annoyed, but he still stayed on the battle map. 2 days later, Jiao Chan was brought to Yiling and handed over to Ouyang Shuo. Although Jiao Chan was already over 30 years old, she still had a beauty that could overshadow the moon and put flowers to shame. It was truly a feast for the eyes. Ouyang Shuo could not help but be impressed by Gaia's ability to create women. They were actually able to recreate the legendary 4 great beauties in history. Moreover, they still retained their charm. He even suspected that Gaia's own image was a combination of the 4 great beauties. Your concubine greets the Lord. During the Three Kingdoms period, it was very common for women of low status like Jiao Chan to be sent around as gifts by the nobles. Jiao Chan was already numb to this. Ouyang Shuo saw that Jiao Chan was a little nervous. He smiled and said, "You don't have to worry. I have no intention of touching you." Although Jiao Chan was beautiful, she was still a woman. How could Ouyang Shuo be interested? Moreover, his ambitions did not lie here. Otherwise, he would not only have Song Jia as his main wife. When Jiao Chan heard this, she did not believe it. Cao Cao had said the same thing before, but what happened? When you return to the main plane, you may have a chance to reunite with General Lu Bu. I will be happy to help you. Ouyang Shuo pointed at Jiao Chan, hoping that she would take the initiative to contact Lu Bu. Really? A glimmer of hope flashed in Jiao Chan's eyes. I never lie. Ouyang Shuo did not explain further. He checked Jiao Chan's attributes. Name, Jiao Chan, God tier. Title, one of the 4 great beauties of ancient China dynasty. Late Eastern Han dynasty identity. Resident of Shanghai City occupation. Dancer loyalty 70 root bone. 18 comprehension. 14 charm. 27 fortune. 7 specialty. Worshipping the moon. Increases the attraction rate of historical figures by 15. Increases the territory's charm by 15. Increases the territory's popularity by 10. Evaluation. She was originally from Zhaoyang Palace. Her body was in the palm of her hand. She only suspected that she had flown over Dongting Spring. She walked steadily through Liangzhou. She was like a new flower in the wind. Her painting hall was warm and fragrant. Jiao Chan's charm was even stronger than Shishu's, but just like Shishu, she was a person with little fortune. Her specialty, worshipping the moon, fully utilized the effects of her high charm. It was truly impressive. Ouyang Shuo began to look forward to completing the 4 Great Beauties storyline mission. Gaia would reward him with the title of City of Charm. After receiving Jiao Chan, Ouyang Shuo's time on the battle map came to an end. He led his troops back to the main map without any reluctance. However, when he chose to teleport the fleet to North Sea Harbor. It was already the morning of September 2nd when he returned to the main map. As soon as Ouyang Shuo returned, he heard a system announcement. System announcement. The Battle of Chibi has officially ended. The main historical figures of the Eastern Han Dynasty have been automatically added to the game. Please explore on your own. The lords who had missed the Battle of Chibi would be able to launch a new round of crazy pursuit of the generals and strategists of the Three Kingdoms in the wilderness. Regardless, Ouyang Shuo would be the biggest winner of the battle after obtaining the 8 historical figures of Zhou Yu, Jia Su, Su Chu, Lu Su, Lu Ming, Gan Ning, Zhou Tai, and Diao Chan. Soon after, another system announcement appeared. System announcement. Liu Bei, the emperor of Shu, has officially taken control of Qingdu. The Qingdu court has been replaced by the Shu Han dynasty. Zhuge Liang, Pang Tong, Fa Zheng, Huang Zhong, Zhao Yun, Ma Chao, Jiang Wei, and other famous officials and generals have been automatically added to the Shu Han dynasty. The announcement broke the hearts of countless lords. This meant that more than a quarter of the talents of the three kingdoms were no longer with them. Apart from those named by the system, Ma Liang, Jiang Wan, Fei Yi, Ma Qi, civil officials, Wei Yin, Ma Dai, Xiang Cheng, Hu Ji, Wang Ping, Liao Hua, Guan Ping, Guan Sa, Guan Xing, Zhang Bao, Yin Yin, and Li Yin would all be added to the Shu Han dynasty and serve under Liu Bei. Qingdu in the wilderness would be even more powerful than Liu Bei's heyday. After all, Gaia had placed all the historical figures of the early and late Shu under Liu Bei's command. Ouyang Shuo was a little shocked by this lineup. It was no wonder that Ouyang Shuo had killed Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, and Chen Di in advance. If he had the chance, even Zhuge Liang and Zhao Yun would not have been able to escape. Now that Zhuge Liang had escaped, there would be no end to his troubles. The historical Zhuge Liang was indeed not as godly in terms of military strategy as described in the novels. However, in terms of internal affairs, Zhuge Liang was truly powerful. In terms of internal affairs, he was probably on par with Xiao He and the others. With Zhuge Liang overseeing Qingdu, there would naturally be no problems with internal affairs. Moreover, in the wilderness, the emperor would not have to worry about his vast territory. He would have more energy and would be more difficult to deal with. Qingdu was located in Shu, bordering Yunnan province, northern Sichuan province, and southern Hunan province. If Shanghai City wanted to conquer Shu in the future, they would inevitably have to compete with Shu Han. There would eventually be a battle between the two giants. Chapter 722. Author's Note. Make an update and request for double monthly votes. In history, the most influential dynasty with Qingdu as its capital was Shu Han. Furthermore, Liu Bei was a relative of the Han dynasty. He represented the orthodoxy and represented the Eastern Han dynasty's emperors in the wilderness. Compared to Cao Cao and Sun Quan, he was more convincing. Liu Bei's valiant generals and famous warriors were enough to defend Qingdu. With all these factors, Gaia chose Liu Bei to oversee Qingdu. Cao Cao and Sun Quan could only quietly withdraw from the stage of history and live in seclusion in an unknown corner of the wilderness. Perhaps one day, they would be encountered by players and trigger some hidden quest. After the system announcement, Gaia immediately released a system patch for the battle map. It was aimed at the traders of south of Rosy Clouds and the others in the Battle of Chibi. Gaia stipulated that if a lord did something detrimental to his faction in the battle map, his contribution points would be judged to be negative. As for what was detrimental to his faction, Gaia would judge it immediately and did not specify. With Gaia's intelligence, it was believed that there would not be any misjudgments or omissions. After the judgment, not only would the Lord be immediately teleported out of the battle map, but the Lord would also have to pay for the teleportation fees. Apart from that, the soldiers of the Lord's army who died in battle could not be resurrected. What was more serious was that after being judged to be negative, Gaia would impose a ban on the Lord based on the severity of the situation. The so-called ban was to cancel the Lord's right to participate in the next battle. It could range from 1 to 3 times. In the entire game period, there were only a dozen battles in the China region. The Battle of Chibi that had just ended was already the 6th battle, and there were fewer battles after that. Therefore, this kind of ban was extremely cruel to the Lord. As for the actions of south of Rosy Clouds and the others in the Battle of Chibi, Gaia did not penalize them further. Gaia had always adhered to the principle that before a patch was released, any loophole could be exploited. Be it Ouyang Shuo or other players, they had all used loopholes in the system. South of Rosy Clouds and the others were naturally no exception. At this point, the aftermath of the Battle of Chibi came to an end. After returning to Shanghai City, Ouyang Shuo handed Zhou Yu, Jia Su, and the others to Du Ruhui. Du Ruhui was to familiarize the generals with Shanghai City's military structure and system. Even Zhou Yu needed some time to adapt to the new plan. Ouyang Shuo believed that the foundation of Shanghai City would greatly shock Zhou Yu and the others. Their loyalty would also increase, and they wouldn't have to stay at the awkward 60 points. As for the arrangements for them, Ouyang Shuo would convene a military conference tomorrow to make a unified arrangement. Jiao Chan was personally taken care of by Song Jia. That afternoon, Liu Bei, who had only been in Chengdu for half a day, made his move. The Shuhan Imperial Court officially announced to the public that Shanghai City was listed as an enemy. All of Shanghai City's operations in Chengdu had to be evacuated within 3 days. Otherwise, it would be forcibly sealed up. If it weren't for the system's rules, Liu Bei would have probably sent his soldiers to raze Shanghai City's Chengdu office to the ground to vent his hatred. As a result, Shanghai City became the first territory to be listed as an enemy by Royal City. Speaking of which, it could be considered a legend. When the news came out, the players were in an uproar. Di Chun and the others were obviously gloating, but the allies of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas were a little depressed. Even a fool could guess that apart from the Shanghai City office, the Chengdu branch of the Bank of the Four Seas would also be implicated. It was almost certain that they would withdraw from the Chengdu market. As such, the Huitong Bank would be able to enjoy the Chengdu market alone. This was like a pie falling from the sky. Ouyang Shuo would probably have to think of a way to appease his guild allies in Chengdu. Although this incident wouldn't hurt the Bank of the Four Seas, it was certain that they would suffer losses. No matter what, they had lost 1/9 of the market. Fortunately, there were a total of 9 royal cities in the China region. Otherwise, Ouyang Shuo would really cry. The other players were just watching the show. What the players really cared about was the meaning behind this incident. Liu Bei directly attacking Shanghai City meant that the royal city's influence on the players was getting stronger. The royal city was no longer a blurry symbol. Instead, it was a living dynasty. They had their own emotions, and they had their own standpoints and factions. If they had different standpoints, they would fight against the players. As for the feudal lords, especially the feudal lords that had a royal city within their territory, they had to be even more vigilant. There were many such feudal lords. Di Chun, War Wolf, Lord Chunshin, Wandering Huan, Military Kill Ripper, and the others all had this problem. If Shanghai City took over Yunnan province, they would also have to face the royal city of Dali. From this point of view, Di Chun and the others didn't feel too comfortable. In short, the main theme of the wilderness in the future would be that there would be fewer and fewer feudal lords, and the oligarchs would become stronger. The enemies of the feudal lords would no longer be limited to the players' territories. They would also have to fight with the natives or even the royal city. The situation would become more and more complicated. Apart from the royal city, the Mongols, Jurchens, western regions, western Xia, and Tubo around the China region were all unstable factors. To a large extent, they would decide the situation of the China region. In the future, the wilderness would be the scene of chaotic battles between feudal lords. Shanghai City, protectorate of the southern border. Since Liu Bei had made such a threat, Shanghai City naturally had to take emergency measures. The withdrawal of the Bank of the Four Seas could be said to be complicated. The most important thing was to return all the savings of the Chengdu players within 3 days. For this reason, Meng Jida transferred a total of 15 million gold coins from the main warehouse to deal with this run on the bank. Although the Chengdu players maintained trust in the Bank of the Four Seas, without a physical bank, they would have to go to other royal city to handle business, which was quite inconvenient. Therefore, most players would still choose to withdraw their funds and deposit them in the Bank of the Four Seas. Only the guilds that maintained cooperation with the Shanghai Alliance might choose to cooperate with the Bank of the Four Seas because they had a large amount of funds and didn't need to operate frequently. But this was also uncertain. No one knew if Liu Bei would put pressure on these guilds. After all, if a guild wanted to establish itself in the royal city, offending the imperial court was a big taboo. Just this alone almost caused the Bank of the Four Seas to have a cash flow problem. For this reason, Meng Jida had to urgently notify the various branches to appropriately tighten the loan. The repercussions caused by this would probably take a few months to slowly recover. In addition to returning the reserves, the Chengdu branch of the Bank of the Four Seas also had the problem of demanding repayment of loans. With the expansion of the loan business, the Chengdu branch of the Bank of the Four Seas had loans from the Bank of the Four Seas. Compared to refunding the reserves, demanding repayment was even more troublesome. If one wanted to know, the loans were all from groups that had a cash flow problem. It was unrealistic to suddenly ask for all the loans, and it would also damage the reputation of the Bank of the Four Seas. The only way was to urge as much as possible. The rest could only be slowly urged in the future. Just this task alone would hold up a large amount of manpower and material resources of the Bank of the Four Seas. If there were people who reneged on their debts and wanted to rely on Liu Bei's protection, then it would be even more troublesome. In short, when Meng Jida heard the news, his head was about to explode. What Ouyang Shuo needed to do was to personally write letters to the cooperating guilds in Chengdu. One was to apologize, and the other was to strengthen the cooperation between the two and try to minimize the impact of this incident. What Ouyang Shuo was more worried about was the evacuation of the office. The Royal City office had never been a simple office, but the intelligence station of the Black Snake Guards. In the future, the Shanghai Guards, the Chamberlain of Dependencies, and other organizations would extend their tentacles into the Royal City through the office. If they were to remove the office, there would be a lot of things to do. The Black Snake Guards Commander Black Snake, the Shanghai Guards Commander Shun Buhai, and the Chamberlain of Dependencies Zhang Yi had already taken action urgently. One was to evacuate a portion of the exposed intelligence personnel. Most importantly, before Liu Bei gained a stable footing, they would move the intelligence personnel underground, disguise themselves more carefully, and enter a state of deep concealment. According to Ouyang Shuo, the more hostile the situation was, the more they could not give up on the intelligence gathering work in Chengdu. It could even be said that Chengdu was the best in the 9 great royal cities in terms of intelligence work. Ouyang Shuo would never fight a battle he was not confident of winning. To be able to infiltrate deep and continuously transmit intelligence was a huge test for the Black Snake Guards and other organizations. Black Snake had already secretly rushed to Chengdu to personally command. As for Shin Buhai and Zhang Yi, they were 2 obvious targets and did not dare to head to Chengdu at this time. They could only stay in Shanghai City and command remotely. Liu Bei's big move had caused all the departments in Shanghai City to be in a mess. The only fortunate thing was that Shanghai City did not have close trade relations with Chengdu. On the contrary, many business associations in Chengdu relied on Shanghai City to carry out maritime trade. Thus, the hostility in Chengdu would not have any impact on Shanghai City's trade in the short term. In the long term, it was impossible to estimate. Once Chengdu's business associations could not go through Shanghai City, they would eventually choose to cooperate with Xiongba and the other coastal territories. The prerequisite was that Xiongba and the others also had to open up maritime trade. This was equivalent to pushing a portion of their resources to the hostile territory. At the same time, the hostility in Chengdu had also caused Shanghai City's recruitment of talents and craftsmen to go up in smoke, cutting off one of Shanghai City's recruitment channels. All in all, the hostility of a royal city was not easy to digest for the player territories. The losses and negative effects were comprehensive and far-reaching. If not for the fact that Shanghai City was a large organization, it would not be able to withstand such an impact. By the time these matters were settled, it was already 5 in the afternoon. In order to settle this matter, the entire protectorate was in a mess. After some time, Ouyang Shuo immediately sent someone to find Zhao Kuo. Passively enduring was not Ouyang Shuo's style. Since Liu Bei had already declared war, Ouyang Shuo naturally had to draw his sword and counterattack. Otherwise, they would think that Shanghai City was easy to bully. Chapter 723. Third year of Gaia, September 3rd. Liu Bei became the ruler of Chengdu and was filled with pride. He also suppressed Shanghai City and felt even more refreshed. However, on that very afternoon, Shanghai City's counterattack came, led by Zhao Kuo. The Ma clan, who had just appeared in Chengdu with Liu Bei, was the famous five steeds of Western Liang. They left Chengdu and quietly moved to Shanghai City. The five horses of Western Liang referred to the descendant of Fubo General Ma Yuan, Ma Teng, and his three sons Ma Chao, Ma Xiu, Ma Tai, and his nephew Ma Dai. The ancestor of the Ma family was the famous general Zhao Shi. Zhao Shi was conferred the title of Lord Ma Fu, and his descendants took Ma Fu as their surname, and later changed their surname to Ma. He was the ancestor of the Ma clan. Zhao Kuo received the order and quietly rushed to Chengdu, urging the Ma clan to evacuate the city. It was only when Ma Chao and the others appeared in Shanghai City that Liu Bei received word from the players. According to an insider, Liu Bei smashed his cup on the spot, his face flushed with anger. How dare you? Had it not been for Zhuge Liang's insistence, Liu Bei would have sent troops to destroy Shanghai City's office in Chengdu. If that were to happen, Liu Bei would probably have to seclude himself in the palace for the rest of his life. Gaia was merciless in punishing NPCs for violating the rules. Following Ma Chao's defection, only Zhao Yun and Huang Zhong of the five tiger generals of Shu Han remained. Ma Teng, Ma Dai, and the others were also rare generals. Their retreat was the equivalent of cutting off one of Liu Bei's arms. Although there are many Shu Han generals in Chengdu this time, after Shu Han was established, there were not many talents. They were only supported by a group of old generals. Following Ma Chao's departure, the Shu Han army that could be sent out was already very few. More importantly, the withdrawal of the Ma clan had shaken the hearts of the Shu Han dynasty. As soon as they entered the wilderness, Shu Han lost a great general. This was not a good sign. Shanghai City's beautiful counterattack was a clear indication to Liu Bei that the wilderness was still the wilderness of the mutants. Even if Liu Bei became the ruler of Chengdu, he would not be able to completely control Chengdu. Only Liu Bei knew how painful it was to be slapped in the face. On one hand, the Ma clan silent retreat showed that the intelligence network that Shanghai City had set up in Chengdu was very successful. They had completed the great cosmos shift right under the enemy's nose. Prime Minister immediately arranged for people to conduct a thorough inspection of the capital city and get rid of these rats. Liu Bei was indeed an ambitious person. After calming down, he immediately thought of a remedy. Remember, the capital city belongs to me. Understood. Zhuge Liang nodded with a solemn expression. In the blink of an eye, Liu Bei became the emperor of Shu and Zhuge Liang became the prime minister. It could be said that things changed and the stars moved. If not for Gaia's help, they probably wouldn't have been able to switch roles so quickly. The intelligent Zhuge Liang had long realized that the wilderness was even more complicated than the three kingdoms in history. The changes in the past 2 days had undoubtedly proved this point. On the other hand, the Ma clan's retreat also displayed the deep foundation of Shanghai City. How amazing! Ma Chao and the others were willing to become officials in Shanghai City because of the influence of their ancestors, Zhao Shi and Zhao Kuo. At the same time, Shanghai City's vast prospects and hegemony in the wilderness were also important factors. This was especially so for Ma Chao. He was in the prime of his life and was still as passionate as before. He wasn't willing to hole up in Chengdu City. In comparison, Shanghai City was a much better place for him to show off his skills. If he had to choose between Chengdu and Shanghai City, Ma Chao would choose Shanghai City without hesitation. In history, only the two brothers, Ma Chao and Ma Dai, had truly joined Liu Bei's side. Ma Teng, Ma Xiu, and Ma Tai, father and son, had been exterminated by Cao Cao. Even Ma Chao was the last among the 5 tiger generals to join Liu Bei. As such, the relationship between the Ma clan and Liu Bei was far from being intimate. This retreat naturally didn't have any psychological barriers. When the news of Ma Chao's defection from Shanghai City spread, the China server was once again in an uproar. No one expected Shanghai City's counterattack to be so swift and fierce. Well done! Someone clapped and cheered for daring to face Royal City head-on. Countless players gave Shanghai City a thumbs up. After all, based on the population, each Royal City in the China server had close to 1 million elite soldiers. Even if Shanghai City's army was added up, there would only be 1 million soldiers. At this stage, who dared to provoke Royal City other than Shanghai City? Even if it was Dichun, he could only retreat when facing the capital and fear him. The players from other Royal City weren't the only ones who cheered. Even the players from Chengdu didn't have a good impression of Liu Bei. The withdrawal of the Bank of the Four Seas had caused inconvenience and negative effects on the players from Chengdu. In the eyes of the players, Liu Bei's actions undoubtedly lacked the bearing of an emperor and seemed a little petty. Not to mention the impact of the withdrawal of the Bank of the Four Seas on the players' chambers of commerce in Chengdu. As such, the withdrawal of the Bank of the Four Seas was a lose-lose situation for both Chengdu and Shanghai City. More importantly, in the eyes of most players, they couldn't treat NPCs as equals. To a certain extent, Liu Bei's attack on Shanghai City had touched a sensitive nerve in the hearts of the players. As such, the players would react violently and even overreact. However, in Ouyang Shua's eyes, he didn't care much about this matter. The moment he killed Guan Yu, Ouyang Shua had a premonition that such a situation would occur. However, at that time, he was still on the battle map and couldn't make any contingency plans. Ouyang Shua treated NPCs and players equally. It was precisely because he viewed Liu Bei as an opponent that Ouyang Shua didn't want to complain. Instead, he fought back decisively. This was a battle between two giants, and it had nothing to do with justice or good or evil. Shanghai City, protectorate of the southern border. That afternoon, Ouyang Shua personally received Ma Chao and the others. Liu Bei's declaration of hostility had disrupted Ouyang Shua's previous plans. Originally, Ouyang Shua was going to hold a military meeting today to finalize the positions of Lu Su and the others. Now that such a thing had happened, it had been delayed. The military meeting could only be pushed back a little. Moreover, with the arrival of Ma Teng and the others, some plans had to be reorganized. In the main hall, Ma Teng and the others formally greeted Ouyang Shua and performed the etiquette of a ruler and a subject. Old General Ma Teng was the first to step out. Standing in front of the group, he bowed and said, "General Ma Teng, Ma Chao, Ma Dai, Ma Xiao, Ma Tai, greetings, Lord." His 3 sons and 1 nephew stood side by side, creating a very eye-catching sight. "Generals, please rise." Ouyang Shua left his seat and walked up to Ma Teng, personally helping the old general up. "Thank you, Lord." Ma Teng stood up and carefully sized up his new master for the first time. Ma Teng's eyes were shrewd and sharp, and he was very good at reading people. Just by looking at him, he felt a chill in his heart, and he no longer looked down on him. When one grew old, they would be somewhat nostalgic. Ma Teng had come mainly to give face to his ancestor, Zhao Kuo. Ma Teng was quite arrogant when he heard that the new master he had never met was a brat. Who would have thought that their first meeting would change Ma Teng's opinion? Although the new master before him was young and had a warm smile on his face, no one dared to be impudent in front of him. However, no one dared to be impudent in front of him or do anything out of line. This was because this person exuded the might of an emperor. No one dared to get close to him. "Old General, can you still fight?" Ouyang Shua asked with a smile. Ouyang Shua also wanted to know if Ma Teng still had the ambition to fight on the battlefield. If Ma Teng didn't want to fight anymore, there would be a position for him in the military affairs department. Ma Teng's eyes widened when he heard this, and he said with emotion, "Don't mention it, Lord. I can still eat 3 bowls of rice in one meal, and I'm good at archery and horsemanship." "Good," Ouyang Shua praised. "An old general can do 2 things. Ha! Ma Teng laughed loudly when he heard this, feeling very pleased. He immediately agreed with this new master. After all, his new master's temper was so good to him. However, Ma Xiao and the others behind him looked worried when they saw their father like this. Ma Chao and the others originally didn't want their father to fight on the battlefield again. The few of them were more than enough. However, their fathers couldn't be shaken by Ma Chao and the others. Ouyang Shuo found it funny when he saw this. Taking this opportunity, Ouyang Shuo checked the attributes of Ma Chao and the others. Name: Ma Chao, Emperor level, Dynasty, Late Eastern Han Dynasty, Identity, General of Shanghai City, Occupation, Special General Loyalty, 70 Commander, 70 Martial Power, 98 Intelligence, 65 Politics, 40 Specialty, Fierce Cavalry, increases troop morale by 30, movement speed by 40, attack power by 20, cultivation method, ancestral rippling spear technique, 36 moves in total. Equipment: sickle spear. Remarks: Meng Qi has the bravery of Xian and Bu, and is feared by Chong and Hu Xian. Talented in both literature and martial arts, he is a hero of the world and the disciple of Bai and Peng. His intellect and bravery are enough to be one of them. Among the three kingdoms, only Ma Chao is comparable to Lu Bu in terms of martial power. With his 98 points of martial power, Ma Chao had carved a bloody path out of the other generals and was rated as an emperor general by Gaia. Ma Chao and Lu Bu were both fierce generals who were partial. Name: Ma Teng, King level, Dynasty, Late Eastern Han Dynasty, Identity, General of Shanghai City, Occupation, High-level General Loyalty, 75 Commander, 72 Martial Power, 80 Intelligence, 60 Politics, 45 Specialty, Shiliang Iron Cavalry, increases troops attack power by 15, increases troops speed by 25, skill, omitted, equipment, broadsword. Remarks: Ma Teng is more than 8 feet tall, has a large body, a masculine face and nose, and a virtuous character. Many people respect him. The north is guarded by Hu bandits, and the east is guarded by the White Cavalry. The three ministers love him very much. As for Ma Dai and the others, they were all king-level generals, and their attributes were about the same as Zhou Tai and the others. Chapter 724. Gaia Year 3, September 6th. 3 days later, the evacuation of Shanghai City's organizations from Chengdu came to an end. Although the evacuation was hurried, at least there wasn't any major trouble. The aftershock dissipated and the sound disappeared. Southern Border Protectorate, Martial Heroic Hall. The Martial Heroic Hall was a side hall to the west of the main hall. It was used for military meetings. Because the main hall was too formal, Ouyang Shuo was not used to discussing business with the generals from high position. On the contrary, the arrangement of the Martial Heroic Hall was exactly the same as a military camp, which suited Ouyang Shuo's taste very well. Zhou Yu, Lu Su, and the other generals of the Jiangdong Navy, Ma Teng and his sons, Jia Su, the strategist, Duru Hui, the director of military affairs, Zhao Qua, the deputy director, Zheng He, the commander-in-chief of the Nanyang Navy, and Er Lai, the commander of the city guards. The fierce General Su Chu stood beside Ouyang Shuo like an iron tower. Long before the military conference, the appointment of the generals had already been signed by Ouyang Shuo. Zhou Yu was officially appointed as the admiral of the North Bay Fleet. He would take up his post the next day. At the same time, Gan Ning was appointed commander-in-chief of the North Sea Bay Fleet's second line. The commander of the first squadron was the Shanghai City Navy's meritorious general, Pei Donglai. Zhou Tai was transferred to the Jiaozhou Fleet under Shi Lang's command, serving as the commander of the Jiaozhou Fleet's first formation. The old general, Huang Gai, was transferred to the Star Continent Fleet, which was led by Smoke and Fire, and served as the deputy admiral and commander-in-chief. Huang Gai and the Smoke Demon were a perfect match, one old and one young. Lu Meng, on the other hand, was transferred to the Mediterranean Fleet commanded by Alvaro as the deputy admiral and commander-in-chief of the fleet. With an intelligent and brave general like Lu Meng overseeing the Mediterranean Sea, Ouyang Shuo would truly be at ease with Alvaro. Out of all the Navy generals, only Lu Meng would be able to partner with Alvaro, that old fox. The advantages of Lu Meng's continuous learning helped him learn the art of ocean navigation from Alvaro. Therefore, arranging for Lu Meng to take up a post in the Mediterranean fleet was both a check and a learning opportunity. Including the commander of the Cliff Mountain Fleet, Kai Mao, each of the commanders of the 5 fleets had a king stage general. Finally, they had gotten rid of the awkward situation of a shortage of fleet generals. Of course, it was nothing compared to the luxurious lineup of the army. Among the 7 Navy generals in Jiangdong, only Lu Su had not yet been appointed. Lu Su was an advisor-type general. If he were to be sent to the fleet, it would be a reckless waste of natural resources. Ouyang Shuo really couldn't bear to let him go. After discussing with Zheng He, they decided to transfer Lu Su to work beside Zheng He. It was strange that the Nanyang Navy had not yet established a headquarters. Taking this opportunity, Zheng He would take the lead and Lu Su would assist. At the same time, a group of officers would be transferred from the 5 fleets, the General Administration of Military Affairs, and the Army Martial Arts Hall to prepare for the establishment of the Nanyang Navy Command. The headquarters was not set up in Shanghai City, but in Lion City of Star State County. The Nanyang Navy straddles the entire Grand Line. Lion City is in the middle of the route, and it is also the choke point of the sea. The headquarters is located here to command and dispatch the 5 fleets. At the same time, it was a strong declaration to the outside world that the Nanyang Navy's target was not inside. The establishment of the headquarters meant that the Nanyang Navy and the General Administration of Military Affairs were no longer subordinate to each other. They were now officially separated and under Ouyang Shuo's direct command. More importantly, it reduced the level of combat command and gave the Navy Commander-in-Chief Zheng He more authority. It fully displayed the Nanyang Navy's mobility and made combat command more flexible. The organizational structure of the Nanyang Navy Command would be based on the structure of the General Administration of Military Affairs. It would set up the Combat Readiness Department, the Military Intelligence Department, the Military Law Department, and the Operations Department. At the same time, the major military ports and the military shipyards along the way would be placed under the jurisdiction of the Nanyang Navy Command. The Nanyang Navy would also gradually establish a separate logistics support system and logistics supply base. When these were all established, the Nanyang Navy could be called a complete naval army. Zhou Yu and the other Navy generals could not hide their shock when they heard the news of the establishment of the headquarters. In the past 3 days, they had learned about Shanghai City and were pleasantly surprised and full of praise. Even Zhou Yu could not help but sigh. He was really a frog in a well before. Everyone's loyalty was raised to a safe value of 70 points. Zhou Yu did not expect to see the emperor's great courage and foresight on his first military meeting. Only insiders could understand the strategic significance of the establishment of the headquarters for the Navy. It was no exaggeration to say that it was a milestone. The emperor had completely broken the shackles of the Nanyang Navy in terms of structure, giving them a broader platform to display their abilities and allow them to gallop freely in the vast oceans. Such breadth of mind and boldness were the characteristics of an emperor. In comparison, the Wu Kingdom, which had always been content with its own corner of the world, was nothing compared to Shanghai City. Zhou Yu's heart was filled with pride and ambition. According to the emperor's original request, Lu Meng, Huang Gai, Gan Ning, and Zhou Tai were required to study at the military academy for 2 months before taking up their posts. Zhou Yu and Lu Su could take up their posts immediately. Now that Zhou Yu had changed his mind, he was also prepared to study at the academy and take up his post after graduation. This was the charm of Shanghai City. What Ouyang Shuo wanted was not a group of historical figures who followed the rules and did not move forward, but a group of true elites who could grow with the city. Zheng He's growth was proof of this. Ouyang Shuo also looked forward to the day Zhou Yu became a divine champion. China lacked excellent naval generals in ancient times, but that didn't mean it lacked good students. Since we lack naval generals, we'll nurture them ourselves. Ouyang Shuo said. War Saint Sun Wu, the principal of the military academy, was extremely supportive of this idea. After understanding the vastness of the world, both Sun Wu and Jiang Shang hoped that Shanghai City could become the vanguard of China's domination of the world. Their thoughts were not constrained by the status quo at all. All saints were probably like that. Ouyang Shuo had heard that Confucius had already ended his life of traveling in the wilderness and was preparing to find a secluded place to combine his experience of traveling to carry out a subversive revision of the Confucian classics. When Ouyang Shuo heard this, he immediately invited Confucius to Southwest University China Hall to complete this great undertaking. After all, Southwest University China Hall was blessed by the heavens and had Ouyang Shuo's full support. The old master had already agreed to the proposal and was on his way to Shanghai City. According to the old master, the revision this time would take several years. Ouyang Shuo believed that the moment it was completed, the Confucian classics would shine for 1,000 years. Other than Zhou Yu and the other naval generals who needed to study, the 5 horses of Western Liang would also be studying for 2 months. Ma Chao and the others' positions had yet to be determined. According to Ouyang Shuo's plan, after conquering Yunnan City, his territory would welcome a new round of military expansion. When that time came, it would be easy to arrange for Ma Chao and the others. Not to mention the 5 horses of Western Liang. Even if 10 more generals came, they would be able to be arranged properly. Among the 5, Ma Teng's situation was similar to Zhou Yu's. Ouyang Shuo originally did not put Ma Teng on the list to study out of consideration for the old general. Who would have thought that Ma Teng would volunteer to go and study? As such, Ma Teng became the oldest student of the military academy since its establishment. Such magnanimity was worthy of praise. It was no wonder that the academic atmosphere in Shanghai City was too strong. In such an environment, as long as one was not the kind of person who did not want to improve, they would not let go of the opportunity to study. The competition in Shanghai City was far stronger than the competition in their history. If you want to stand out among so many outstanding generals, how can you not study? This was Ma Teng's warning to his 3 sons and 1 nephew. Among the new generals, the only one who did not study was Su Chu. Su Chu had officially replaced the dead Chen Dameng as Ouyang Shuo's personal guard captain. Ouyang Shuo did not mistreat this fierce general and gave him the rank of a 5th-rank general. Similarly, while Wang Feng was recuperating, Su Chu would also temporarily be the commander of the Divine Martial Guard. In fact, in the battle map, Wang Feng had clearly begged to resign from his position as the commander of the Divine Martial Guard. At that time, Ouyang Shuo rejected him, but Ouyang Shuo did not want Wang Feng to give up. After returning to Shanghai City, Wang Feng once again requested to resign. "Don't worry, my lord. I will recuperate well and practice my one-arm technique so that I can fight on the battlefield for my lord again. It's just that the Divine Martial Guard cannot be without a commander for a day. I hope my lord can fulfill my wish," Wang Feng said sincerely. Ouyang Shuo could only agree. Ouyang Shuo had not yet decided on a new commander of the Divine Martial Guard. When Wang Feng was injured, the one who was the most upset was Qing Er. According to Qing Er's maid, after visiting Wang Feng that day, Qing Er cried for an entire night. Her eyes were swollen from crying. The next day, Qing Er came to visit her big brother, Ouyang Shuo. Ouyang Shuo was already prepared to be reprimanded by Qing, but he did not expect the little girl to make a special request. She asked to marry Wang Feng. Hearing Qing Er's request, Ouyang Shuo was silent for a long time. "Qing Er, have you thought it through?" Objectively speaking, Wang Feng had lost an arm and was not a good match. Although this was cruel to Wang Feng, as an elder brother, Ouyang Shuo still hoped that Qing Er could be more cautious. "Big brother, I have thought it through. Please fulfill my wish." Qing Er's expression was resolute. Ouyang Shuo looked at his little sister in front of him and felt that she was somewhat unfamiliar. Since when did this little girl grow to this extent and have such awareness? He had no way of getting an answer. "In that case, I will let your sister-in-law handle this marriage," Ouyang Shuo said. "Thank you, big brother." Qing Er was overjoyed. "But will Wang Feng agree?" Ouyang Shuo asked. The Wang Feng that Ouyang Shu knew would not agree to this marriage under such circumstances. Wang Feng was not willing to be a burden to Qing. Needless to say, there was also a trace of a man's pride causing trouble. Qing's eyes dimmed. She had clearly thought of this. She had probably hit a wall when she visited Wang Feng yesterday. I will make him agree. Qing had clearly made up her mind. Ouyang Shu was silent. Chapter 725. The military meeting in the Hall of Martial Valor was still ongoing. In addition to the arrangement for the generals, Jiasu also had an official position as the chief clerk of the Protectorate of Southern Border. The chief clerk was first established in the Qin dynasty. At that time, the prime minister and generals all had chief clerks, equivalent to the current secretary general or chief of staff. The chief clerk under the generals could also lead troops into battle. Historically, the chief clerk was in charge of different affairs, but most of them were officials with the nature of aides. Jiasu's position was to be Ouyang Shu's military aide. At the same time, he assisted Ouyang Shu in managing the internal affairs of the Protectorate of Southern Border. The internal affairs here referred to the affairs of the outer hall, including ceremonial guards, carriages, assistants, guards, salaries, and official matters. It was completely different from the Internal Affairs Division that Song Jia was in charge of. The secretarial office led by Nan Pu was also under Jia Su's jurisdiction. Speaking of which, this was a position that Ouyang Shu had tailor-made for Jia Su. As the territory's affairs increased, the various directorates had their own interests to pursue. Ouyang Shu increasingly needed to arrange some professional aides by his side. The existence of an aide was to assist Ouyang Shu in coordinating the various agencies. The second was to provide Ouyang Shu with plans, suggestions, and political advice. Of course, Jiasu's main role was to assist in military affairs. In addition to the new personnel, the City Guard Corps that had been transported back through the battle map would also move out of Shanghai City, according to Ouyang Shu's previous plan. They would set up a camp outside the city. Considering the geographical location of Lianzhou Basin, Duru Hui suggested that the City Guard Corps be set up at the original site of the Western Camp. They would also expand and improve it. Because there was a small mountain near the Western Camp, it was named the Western Mountain Camp. In the future, the Western Mountain Camp would be referred to as the Rhone Guards responsible for protecting Shanghai City. At the same time, the Lianzhou Garrison Division would be disbanded and integrated into Shanghai City's bailiffs. Aside from the elite Mongolian war horses brought back by the city guards for their own use, the remaining 40,000 Mongolian war horses were all transported to the Xuanzhou Military Horse Farm. The Xuanzhou Military Horse Farm raised Mongolian war horses and had become the territory's second largest military horse farm. With the large-scale expansion of the territory's cavalry, war horses, especially elite war horses, would become an important bottleneck. Although Ouyang Shu had long ago established the office of the Discipline and Discipline, as well as the military horse farm of Storm Valley, the military horse farm of Providence, and the military horse farm of Sun Province, the supply of war horses still could not meet the demand. For a long time in the future, the territory would need to purchase war horses from the outside world, especially Mongolia. The problem was that Shanghai City and Mongolia were located at the northernmost point and southernmost point respectively. It was extremely inconvenient to transport them, and the cost was huge. It was truly a headache. This time, the purchase of 70,000 Mongolian war horses was completed based on the settings of the war map. Perhaps during the next battle, Ouyang Shu would use this method to purchase Mongolian war horses on a large scale. He planned to entrust Lao Ai, Feng Xiuhuang, and other allies to purchase the war horses first. Then, they would bring them to the battle map through their infantry and hand them over to Shanghai City's infantry to bring them back to Shanghai City. Although the process was complicated, it was the most convenient method that Ouyang Shu could think of. After solving the problem of the City Guard Corps, the military meeting came to an end. The aftermath of the battle map gradually dissipated, and Shanghai City embarked on a new journey. Ouyang Shuo did not forget that before the war started, Shanghai City's biggest military operation was to attack. It was only temporarily stopped because of the battle. As for the information he obtained from the battle map, Ouyang Shuo was not interested in building a white Ho elite army. Instead, he handed the manual to the military lecture hall to perfect the information bank. At the same time, he would use the lecture hall to summarize and refine the essence of the white Ho elite army and teach it to the entire army. This was the most efficient way to utilize the resources. In the afternoon of the 6th of September, Ouyang Shuo's study. The afternoon sun shone through the exquisite window paper into the study, casting spots of light on the carpet. After experiencing the coldness of the battle map, one would finally understand the warmth of the sun. In the light, Black Snake, Shun Buhai, and Zhang Yi, the three heads of intelligence and diplomacy, were all present. Other than them, the tactician Jia Su, who had just been appointed as the chief historian, was also present. Since he was a military advisor, Ouyang Shuo naturally gave Jia Su the authority to access the territory's intelligence. Jia Su was also one of the few officials in the territory who could directly communicate with the three organizations. The newly appointed chief historian was now involved in a confidential matter. Since the battle map and the dragon-seeking acupoints were at odds, Ouyang Shuo naturally had to strengthen his defense after returning to the main map. He was no longer the person who trusted his brothers wholeheartedly in his previous life. Have you found out which force is in contact with the dragon-seeking acupoints? Ouyang Shuo asked Black Snake. Black Snake nodded. I've basically found out. Although I don't know who this force is, I can be sure that they are inextricably linked to Overlord City. Overlord City? Ouyang Shuo was a little surprised. Black Snake also understood his lord's confusion. He nodded and said, It is indeed Overlord City. As for whether this contact is sincere or purely to sow discord, it is still uncertain for the time being. What the purpose is no longer important. A cold light flashed in Ouyang Shuo's eyes. He briefly explained the matter of the battle map. Even if it was previously to sow discord, after this incident, the two parties might really be in cahoots with each other. My lord, what do you mean? A trace of inexplicable excitement flashed in Black Snake's eyes. From today onwards, we will officially launch the isolation plan for Dragon-Seeking City. The three major organizations, the Black Snake Guards, the Shanghai Guards, and the Chamberlain of Dependencies, will work together to secretly dismember Dragon-Seeking City and bring all of them under the direct control of Shanghai City. The establishment of the alliance relied on Shanghai City's influence. The list of alliance members had to be reported to Shanghai City. Ouyang Shuo even personally met some of the lords. Be it the Black Snake Guards or the Chamberlain of Dependencies, none of them had relaxed their infiltration. Even the dragon-seeking acupoints probably didn't expect that the alliance he was so proud of had already fallen into Shanghai City's control. The lords of the Minnan province were willing to join, definitely not because of Dragon-Seeking City, but because of Shanghai City's huge influence in China. It was unknown if they had a clear understanding of the dragon-seeking acupoints. However, judging from the performance of the dragon-seeking acupoints in the battle map, they probably hadn't realized it yet. The dragon-seeking acupoints thought that Dragon-Seeking City's influence in the Minnan province was the result of his personal efforts. Ouyang Shuo had already considered the embryonic form of Plan L when he was drawing the battle map. Now that his thoughts were clearer, he continued, the infiltration of Dragon-Seeking City must be even more secretive. I suspect that the dragon-seeking acupoints will strengthen their guard against you. Don't let them catch you by the tail. My lord, don't worry. Black Snake smiled. Dragon-Seeking City's intelligence organization, to put it bluntly, is a complete layman. It's fine for them to investigate on the surface, but they're far from being able to fight with us. Then focus on the people. They can't be laymen. At the very least, Handan City is a tough nut to crack. Ouyang Shuo warned. Chapter 726. Gaia 3rd Year, September 10th. Shanghai City. Yesterday, he had received a report from Hua Tubing that the Imperial Guard Corps had arrived at the front lines and had officially joined up with the Dragon Stallion Army. In a few days, the army would break camp and move to the border of Mengding County. The three legions had a total of 210,000 soldiers, and they covered the sky as they pressed towards Mengding County. At the same time, Lingxi City's field army would march south as well, and they would converge at the border of Mengding County to coordinate with Shanghai City's army from afar. The two armies were locked onto Mengding County. Yunnan Province was dominated by hilly terrain, the relatively gentle mountainous region only taking up a tenth of the total area. Most of the land was uneven in elevation, mountain mists rising and falling, strange peaks rising and falling. After the game map was expanded by 10 times, the hills became mountains, which were even steeper. The territories within the Yunnan province were practically isolated cities, one after another. Between the cities, there was only a narrow mountain road that connected them. Traffic was extremely inconvenient. Whether it was mobilizing troops or transporting rations, it was extremely difficult. As a result, although Yunnan province was large, the number of lords born here couldn't be considered many. Moreover, they were mainly concentrated in Kunming County and Dali County. Kunming County, in particular, gathered more than half of Yunnan province's essence. Otherwise, why would it be said that once Lingxi City occupied the entire territory of Kunming County, it could be called the overlord of Yunnan province? Other than Kunming County, only Dali County was slightly better. However, the royal city of Dali was located here, and the lords were not fools. Judging from the actions of Emperor Qin, Emperor Wu of Han, and other emperors, it was almost impossible for them to make a name for themselves in the commandery where the royal city was located. The remaining Mengding County, Tingyue County, and Dongchuan County were all sparsely populated places. Therefore, Yunnan city-state was the weakest of the four city-states. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been so frightened by the actions of Shanghai City that they couldn't sleep at night. Before the start of the Battle of Red Cliffs, when Shanghai City announced its intention to attack Yunnan city-state, Yunnan city-state had begun to prepare for war. Qin Fan even took the opportunity to trick the alliance of mountains and seas. There was no room for compromise between the two sides. In a short period of time, Yunnan city-state had gathered 200,000 soldiers in Mengding County. This was already the limit of what they could do. They had used up more than 80% of their field troops. It could be said that he would either succeed or die trying. If they could defend Mengding County, the city-state of Yunnan would be safe for the time being. If they could not defend Mengding County and the main army was defeated there, then Tingyue County, Dongchuan County, and even Dali County would be involved in the war. Mengding County became the main battlefield for both sides. With the end of the Battle of Chibi, the smell of gunpowder in the war became stronger and stronger. According to the intelligence gathered by the General Directorate of Military Affairs, it wasn't just Yunnan province. The entire southern border was mobilizing their armies. The 150,000 soldiers of Lingnan city-state had gathered at the border of Jiaozhou County, confronting the 1st and 2nd Corps of the brave Tiger Army stationed in the east. According to Ruan Ping's attitude, the two sides could start fighting at any time. It could even be said that the Siege Lion had even asked Ouyang Shua if he wanted to mobilize the army of River Province to be responsible for restraining Xiangnan Province or Jinan Province. But Ouyang Shua firmly refused. Ouyang Shua knew extremely clearly that if the River Province made a move, then the nearby Stillwater Province and Southward Province would follow suit and cause a chain reaction. In that case, it would make things more complicated. A single mishap and things would get out of hand. Ouyang Shua still liked to do things that he was sure of. The armies of Xiangnan City-State and Chuanbei City-State had also gathered at the southern border, and one of their troops had even entered Guilin County, directly threatening the northern gate of Shanghai City, the Withering Fortress. The 1st and 2nd Corps of the Leopard Army stationed at the Withering Fortress were already ready for battle. The commander of the Leopard Army, Han Xian, had already issued a military order in front of Ouyang Shua, saying that they must take advantage of this opportunity to take down the enemy's Xuanwu Pass in one fell swoop and take back the lost position. For this, Han Xian had already formulated a detailed battle plan. As for whether they could take back Guilin County, it depended on how the war developed. Although the attitude of Chuanbei City-State towards Shanghai City had changed, the determination of Xiangnan City-State to resist Shanghai City was still relatively strong. It was not easy to take back Guilin County from the two major city-states. According to Du Ruhui, whether they could take back Guilin County did not depend on the situation in the north, but on the outcome of the decisive battle between Shanghai City and Yunnan City-State. Ouyang Shua deeply agreed with this judgment. If the battle goes well, they might take the initiative to spit it out, Ouyang Shua said. In the battle of the third year of Gaia, Shanghai City alone resisted the four major city-states, and it would determine the future of the southern border. The entire China region was paying attention to this unprecedented war. The number of troops involved in this war was estimated to be more than 1 million. The players were looking forward to the birth of a peerless overlord in the southern border, or would Shanghai City suffer a setback in this war, delaying its path to hegemony and causing it to dim? Shanghai City, which had been dormant for half a year, would amaze the world. There was no need to say more about the importance of this war. Therefore, after dealing with the matters of Shanghai City, Ouyang Shua wanted to rush to the front lines and personally supervise the war. Unexpectedly, while Ouyang Shua was packing his luggage, 2 uninvited guests came to Shanghai City. The visitors were none other than the brothers Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan, who had just entered the wilderness. The 2 brothers were the legitimate descendants of Xiahou Ying. Therefore, Ouyang Shua was not surprised by the arrival of the 2. Unfortunately, the 2 brothers, Chao Hong and Chao Chun, did not follow them to Shanghai City. Since the 2 of them came, Ouyang Shua could only push aside the matters at hand and receive them alone. Shanghai City, Southern Border Protectorate. In order to show his closeness, Ouyang Shua did not receive the 2 brothers in the main hall, but chose to meet them in the study. At the same time, Ouyang Shua specially invited Xiahou Ying over to bond. In the war map, the 2 brothers did not have the opportunity to meet Xiahou Ying. Now that they finally met in person, they had to greet him solemnly. Xiahou Ying was tactful and did not usurp the host position. After a brief greeting, he formally introduced the 2 brothers to his lord and said with a smile, "My lord, please accept these 2 brats and give them some food to eat." The 2 pitiful middle-aged men, Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan, could only be obedient babies. In the words of their ancestor, the 2 great generals had become beggars. Xiahou Yuan's already red face turned even redder from holding back his anger. His single eye looked even more ferocious. Even so, the 2 brothers did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction. In ancient times, their ancestors' seniority and status were far too high. Let alone the 2 brothers. Even their father could only be a brat in front of their ancestor. The 2 brothers looked at each other and could only smile bitterly. They tactfully bowed before Ouyang Shua could speak and solemnly said, "Xiahou Dun, Xiahou Yuan, greets my lord. Generals, please rise." Ouyang Shua smiled and personally helped the 2 brothers up. "Generals, you are both heroes of the present age. I am very happy that you have come to Shanghai City to serve." Ouyang Shua naturally knew how to behave when Xiahou Ying belittled the 2 juniors. Sure enough, when Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan heard these words, their expressions clearly relaxed. The 2 had come to Shanghai City because of their ancestor Xiahou Ying and because of Cao Cao's recommendation. In the war map, Cao Cao had only met Ouyang Shua a few times, but he could see that Ouyang Shua was extraordinary. Therefore, he recommended the 2 brothers to serve in Shanghai City. After all, Cao Cao had already lived in seclusion and did not want the 2 brothers to hide in the wilderness with him. That would be unfair to them. Not only Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan, but also Chao Chun and Chao Hong were also sent away by Cao Cao. Chao Zhan, Chao Xiu, and Chao Chun were the only ones who stayed by Cao Cao's side. In reality, Chao Chun and Chao Hong had chosen to go to Lingxi City. After all, Chao-Kin of Lingxi City was the ancestor of the Chao clan. Taking this opportunity, Ouyang Shuo checked Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan's attributes. Name, Xiahou Dun, King level, Dynasty. Late Eastern Han Dynasty, identity. Shanghai City General, occupation, high-level general, loyalty, 75 commander, 70 martial strength, 70 intelligence, 75 politics, 80 specialty. Rush for rations, increases the army's rations utilization rate by 15%. Increases the rations transportation efficiency by 25%. Technique, omitted equipment. Long saber evaluation. Xiahou Dun, who expanded his territory, fought against tens of thousands of soldiers. He plucked an arrow from his withered eye and called for his parents angrily. He saved the people with his loyalty and swallowed the traitors with his hatred. Lone Moon alone surveyed the world, and his achievements illuminated the universe. Xiahou Dun could not be considered a famous general who could fight, but he was definitely the #1 general under Cao Cao's command. Strictly speaking, Xiahou Dun was a logistical general and was considered unique among the generals. According to historical records, Xiahou Dun was studious and specialized in teaching. Although he was in the army, he would personally welcome his teachers to give lectures. He was also unyielding, and when someone humiliated his teacher at the age of 14, he killed that person. Although he was in a high position, he was frugal and lived a simple life. When he had extra money, he would give it to his subordinates. Name, Xiahou Yuan, King level, Dynasty. Late Eastern Han Dynasty, identity. Shanghai City General, occupation, high-level general, loyalty, 75 commander, 72 martial strength, 82 intelligence, 60 politics, 45 specialty. Rapid movement, increases the army's attack power by 10, increases the army's speed by 35. Technique, omitted. Equipment, spear evaluation. As a general, Xiahou Yuan is always on the move and often catches the enemy off guard. He is good at setting up changes, but weak at controlling the masses. Xiahou Yuan was a very outstanding military general, and he was good at mobile warfare. That was why there was a saying in the army, General Xiahou Yuan, 503 days, 1,006 days. It was said that Xiahou Yuan's troops could travel 500 miles in 3 days. How shocking was that? Xiahou Yuan's most outstanding battle was against Han Sui in the Xingu battle. Han Sui's subordinates were mostly from the Di and Chang tribes, and they were all very elite. Xiahou Yuan traveled a long distance and attacked Han Sui's rear. Han Sui came to his rescue and decisively defeated Han Sui with a fatigued army that did not have an advantage in quality or quantity. Han Sui suffered a crushing defeat from then on and could only wait to be destroyed. That was why the two brothers were rare talents. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.